explicit violence in your writings?
It's what I do, is one answer. I write horror fiction. There is a kind of curiosity that we have as human beings about our life processes. One of our last life processes is death. It's a legitimate subject for curiosity. We shouldn't be ashamed that the macabre or the morbid exercises some fascination upon us. I tell it like it is. If it's there in my mind's eye, I put it on the page. And that seems to me to be a legitimate way to write.
Thank you everyone for joining us here on Written and Read. That is the Horror Reader and Writers podcast. We got an awesome guest for you guys today. He's a veteran of the writing business, and he's been doing writing for how long, Daniel? Is it 16 years? You said that he was writing professionally.
I believe so, and he's been writing full-time since 2013, so almost 10 years of full-time writing, which is impressive in this day and age.
Yeah, that's awesome. None other than Jay Wilburn. We were lucky enough to meet him at Scares That Care, and I think you had talked to him before that, though, and we had seen him on part of the Gross Out contest on Killicon. So he's a really good guy, a wealth of information, really, for what we're doing on this show, I think. And yeah, we're definitely excited to get right into it with him. So before we do that, though, we're just going to introduce ourselves for anybody who is not familiar with the podcast, and then we'll just give some quick updates on our own stuff, should we have anything to update you on. But I'm Aaron Beauregard, author of The Slob, Modern Hysteria, The Cuck, and so many other extreme horror books. You can find most of my work on Amazon, and if you want like signed copies, merchandise, odd items, you can go to AB Horror, just like my initials, abhorror.com. Daniel?
Daniel J. Volpe. Everything I have is pretty much on Amazon as well. I am now an award-winning author, and Roland could not be the only one to say that anymore. My novel, Left to You, won the inaugural Godless 666 Award for Best Novel. So I just wanted to say thank you to everybody that supported that voted for that book. Drew Steppick especially for hosting it, and Dawn Shea from D&T Publishing for obviously publishing it. So thank you, everybody. I'm also nominated for two Splatterpunk Awards this year for Left to You also, and Talia. My newest book, Plastic Monsters, should be out by the time this airs. So if you guys like body horror, plastic surgery, fuckery, if you will, check that out. That is should be out by the time this airs. And some other books that I put out recently, Visceral 2 with Pat Harrison from Death's Head, and I have some chapbooks coming out also through Death's Head through their Dead Sky Inc. imprint. And again, you can find me at danieljvolpehorror.com if you want some signed books and some merch. Roland?
Hey, everybody. Hi, not bye. My name is Roland Bursey Jr. I'm author of Unportioned, the award-winning, this is Splatterpunk Extreme horror novella. Payback is a Witch, Pre-Thanksgiving Stress Disorder, and a few other short stories I have in anthologies. Working on two things. One is going to be out in an anthology in the fall. I can't say anything about that yet because it hasn't been announced. And then I'm working on a solo project, which is going to be my longest one. I'm already up to 20,000 words, and for me, that's long. So yeah, you can find my stuff on Amazon, my website, rolandburseyjr.com. Send me a message on Facebook. And Dan, you want to get Carver?
Yeah, so unfortunately, Carver Pike, as we're filming this just before the summer, the equinox, right? Is that what it is? So apparently, like the bull semen is really rich and thick right now, just because of the cycle of the planet. So unfortunately, Carver can't be with us today. So Carver Pike, he's everywhere as Carver Pike. His newest book should still be his newest one, Faces of Beth, which has an amazing introduction by the Brian Keene is out now. It's been getting rave reviews from everybody. It seems to be people are already calling it their favorite book of 2022. So check that out. His Diablo Snuff series, sick shit there. I loved all the books that I've read from that. That's out. Scalp, his Parasitic Head Lice. He loves that one with his follow-up Crabs, which will hopefully be coming out soon. Aaron's Pubic Region is the cover of that book. So
it's an autobiography. Yeah.
It should be putrid and fucking terrifying. So Carver,
look,
we miss you.
If you're upset he's not here, guys, too, like Daniel said, blame the fucking planet. It's a planetary cycle. It's not like you could just fucking skip out on this thing, you know?
No.
It's just
the harvest right now. He sent us pictures, gallons of frothy cum.
It's a fucking blood moon, and you know, it's a leap year, and you have to take all that into account.
And this is what he does. You can't maintain youthful, bouncy, full hair just by Tresemme. It's not going to work. You need bull semen, and only the richest, frothiest will do. So, Carver, we miss you, and we hope the harvest is going well.
All right, guys. Well,
disgusting.
Do we really? I mean, we probably don't have that much shit to talk about. I'm trying to think of when this fucking episode's going to come out.
I know. I don't know what we can talk about. I'm gonna say this. There's some secret projects with some secret people coming out, and follow us on fucking social media. You'll get everything up to date, like live. But we don't know when these episodes come out because we're fucking delinquents.
Look, it's like, here's the thing. It's like we're trying to record a bunch of episodes because we want to have somewhat of a life in the summer. I still got to fucking edit them, but at least we don't have to all, you know, break up our weeks or our vacations and stuff. Tell our family go fuck themselves. You know what I mean? We don't have to do that if we're doing this. So, but it might come up. It might come at the expense of our own fucking promotion. Sadly. So, you know, head on down to abhorror.com now.
Never
car salesman shit, dude.
That's definitely for the low price of fucking $19.99. You too.
There is some awesome secret projects going on right now, though. You know.
Yeah, I just got some edits back today on one of mine, so it's gonna be good. Yeah,
there's big announcements all around with everybody on this call right now, except Carver in the Bull Seaman. He does have other secret projects though, but I'm not at liberty to divulge them.
No, I heard he was going to release one where the cover was actually a bull, but instead of having horns, it was two giant cocks, and it was just spraying him everywhere. But that's all the teaser he would give us, so I can't really release any more of what it's called.
That's too risky for Amazon, so he's going to be self-printing on that, and that'll be an exclusive, folks.
Yeah, I think it's called Shooting from the Hip, but I'm not 100% sure if that's I know it's a working title, but...
Well, if nothing else, if not informative, we hope it was entertaining for you guys. You know, so this is what it is. All right.
Yeah. Come down to this. This is what we've come down to.
Is there anything else, Roland? You look like you have something to say.
You got something to say, Roland?
No, I have nothing to say at all.
You know what?
I'm jealous that I can't be with a bull with the two penises.
Well,
more.
It's like, Roland, where's the saddle? Like, you're not supposed to sit on the head.
I bareback it.
Yeah.
You're still a young vampiric man, though. You have plenty of time, plenty of bulls in your future, I imagine.
Can't wait.
All right. Well, without further ado, then let's go ahead and get into our interview for this episode. None other than Jay Wilburn.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the author interview. Aaron, what the fuck?
It was him. He's like, don't fuck up.
Oh, come on.
He got me.
Welcome back, everybody, to the best part of the show, the author interview. And today we have a real treat for you. We have a legend in the horror industry, Mr. Jay Wilburn. Everybody, Jay Wilburn. Can we get a round of applause?
Thank you for having me, guys.
So Jay Wilburn is a professional writer, obviously. He lives in South Carolina, correct?
That is true.
With his wife and two sons. According to Goodreads, Goodreads has you listed as the author or contributor to 139 books, which is incredibly impressive.
Probably, yeah. I guess that includes anthologies. That'd probably be true.
That's still pretty impressive, Jay. I'm not gonna lie. Some of his books people might recognize him from Vampire Christ. I believe that's a series. Vampire series. Time Eaters. The Curse of the Rat Man, which I loved. Of course, Seersucker Motherfucker, which was Splatterpunk Award nominated, correct, Jay?
Nominated, yeah.
All right, that's not a winner, but it's nominated. People, it's that good to get the nomination, which we've all been there. You co-authored a few books, The Enemy Held Near and Yard Full of Bones with Armand Rosamilia. So welcome, Jay. Why don't you kind of just give us a little bit of background, fill in all the blanks that I missed there.
All right. I started my career as a teacher and did that for a number of years. And it was actually some health stuff. I had some health stuff going on, which I always do. And then one of my sons did, and we kind of had to make a choice about how we were going to handle that. And I'd kind of gotten disillusioned with public education at that point. So I was real quick to volunteer to give up my job. And the plan was to make a go at writing. And that was back at the very beginning of 2013 that I pulled the trigger on that. And really at that point, I had no credits or anything that would have justified that kind of move. And then when I look back, I was cataloging all my stories. So I got them all like in one archive. So I had to dig back pretty far to find them. And like the oldest stories, I didn't even remember them. So I had to actually open them up and read a little bit to remember what they were in order to categorize them. And it was a lot of that stuff from way back then. And as I look at the quality of writing, I'm like, oh my God, I should have starved to death like that. There was no justification to go full time. But I kind of just believed my own myth. I actually got better at what I did and figured out various platforms as they came up. Did ghostwriting for a while to kind of bridge that transition. And I'm doing okay now. I'm actually money's a little tight in terms of like sales coming, and I'm doing better at this point in my life than any point earlier financially. But there's those up and down swings, and even though I guess in terms of overall sales, I'm sort of in the midst of a downswing. I prepared better over the years so that not all my sources of income from writing are all dry at the same time. And so I got a few things coming out that'll probably start that next upswing into more comfortable territory.
That's awesome. Yeah, because we talk about Jay creating like multiple revenue streams, and it's like I've relatively recently like discovered how to do that as well. But what different revenue streams have you found, and which ones are most successful, would you say?
There's success is relative in writing, I think. So like if we were talking a different kind of business, you'd have these real set benchmarks and numbers that you could talk about and have reliable income. Like success in writing is like at this point in my life, I write full time and I pay all my bills mostly on time. And in writing, that's considered wildly successful. Whereas like in every other career, that's baseline. Like that's entry point starting in a career. But for writing, being able to survive is just this huge thing. So with that in mind, like nothing is a silver bullet. So, when you get into like something like ghostwriting, it ebbs and flows as well in terms of opportunity and money. But ghostwriting money tends to be more quicker. Whereas like writing in your own name, whether I split it up into, self-publishing, indie, and then if you can get into a higher level, that money tends to come slower and less reliable, but it still comes. And then I think now we're getting to a point where you're talking about less traditional forms of publishing, like when you talk about Patreon and the things within that sphere. There's more than just that one platform that basically does the same thing. Then you get to the live streaming platforms like Twitch, which have earning potential if you can work them over time. And then you get into things like Godless and other various avenues to which you can put material out. And as new ones come up, some of them are winners, some of them are winners for only a few people, and then some of them don't produce anything. And eventually you decide you're either going to stick with it or you're going to leave those in the wayside.
So considering that you're doing this full time, do you how do you advertise your books? Are you just like on Facebook, or do you use different forms of advertisement?
Well, you got to kind of borrow from everybody. So you figure out what's working for various folks and you steal their method of doing it. So you got just basic social media. Then you got the Books of Horror group that opens up different avenues. And a number of newer authors have done really well on that through them. Then you got other forms where where you do buy ads in various places, and then you decide what you're going to do. Like, are you doing the Amazon ads? Are you doing other social media platform ads? Which products do best with that? And then you get into you can do print and other things as well. So some of the older traditional things are there too. I'm finding that having a few readers that really, really believe in you is better than any paid advertising. So once you get someone like that and you start to foster those people, I think the sociological term for them is mavens, somebody who kind of chooses you as their cause and then pushes you out to the world, sells 100 times better than any form of buy my own book, which is what basically all other advertising is.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah,
Jay, I just wanted to come back to something real quick. Actually, go ahead, Aaron, because I want to ask this because it might be a longer process for Jay.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, I was just going to say that, like, I totally agree as far as, like, finding those people that believe in you, because, like, anyone who sees, like, a TikTok video, for example, that's just somebody who enjoyed something. There's no price tag attached to it. Typically, I mean, there are TikTokers that take on shit and, causes and whatnot, or get paid to do it. But I think it's pretty obvious who's doing that and who's not, who's promoting an actual product and who actually just saying something that they loved. And that stuff, it just spreads like wildfire sometimes, like if you get the right stream of people looking at it. So yeah, that was all I was going to say. But go ahead, Roland. Did you have something to add to it?
No. So Jay, I wanted to just come back to one thing we talked about, like a stream of revenue, and I want to talk about Twitch, because I know you've been on it for a while, and I know Armand Rosamelia is doing a Twitch stream as well. So for anybody that's not familiar, can you just give us a quick rundown of what Twitch is, how you got into it, and how it's working for you?
Twitch is essentially a video game platform where people live stream, and then there's avenues of support, which include subscribing, basic ads that run. There's in-platform currency called bits that people can donate, and then you can donate money directly. And then there's a few others. You can get sponsorships and stuff like that if you're at a level much higher than what I am. So in terms of being a writer on there, it's off-brand, but there are a growing number of people who do that. Lately, I've been doing some video game stuff on there as well, so I'll throw that in the middle. But basically, what I do is I'll actually write a short story on stream. Few people do that, and most of them do it silently. I actually speak the story out loud as I'm typing it, which I think differentiates me a little from the competition. Not that I see everybody there as competition, but you know what I mean. And you reach certain thresholds. So you have affiliate, and then you have partner, and affiliate is where you're eligible for financial return to monetize. And I'm doing okay to where it depends. It varies widely from month to month, and especially with health stuff going on sometimes where I'm inconsistent, that can vary the number a good bit. But I'm doing pretty well on it. I make more money on there most months than I do on Patreon. Usually I sell more books than I make money on Twitch, but some of that's because of Twitch. So I'll, in my about page, I have links to a bunch of books and and I use ads to the books and sort of the build up time and during the start screen before I come on, so people will see those as well. And I can trace a number of sales from Twitch. So there's been months that most of my book sales came from Twitch, as opposed to other avenues. And again, that's not every month, but on those months, if you add in like book sales that channeled through Twitch and then the Twitch income itself, there have been months where it's my largest single source of income if you include all of that together.
It's an interesting sort of strategy too, because like, I mean, you know, some writers will have like trouble, you know, getting themselves to write. Like, what better way than being like, oh, well, I have to, you know, I have an audience at this time. This is like a dedicated time for me. And, you know, you're creating like you know, it's like another platform with other unique followers and stuff. And how do you track those sales exactly? Is it just like people clicking the link in your chat?
Clicking the link. There's sometimes you can, if you end up using affiliate links from Amazon, you can track that way. I tend not to use those quite as much, just because I don't want to be dishonest with the people where I'm getting a revenue off of them clicking or whatever. But there's other websites and platforms that you can kind of connect a link through that'll track some stuff for you. There's no perfect way to do it, because none of them work all the time. So, you know, we're kind of get into the wonky stuff of how technology works. But just in terms of being able to track a link directly from the page, sometimes I'm able to see those numbers, understanding that not all the numbers aggregate, depending on what source you're using to track. In terms of it being a strategy, it does play into some skills that we've kind of inadvertently developed as writers. So the fact that you do podcasts, the fact that, you know, you do live streams and stuff like that, you've developed some of the on-camera skills that would make doing a Twitch live easier for you. Especially the number of times people had to live stream during the pandemic. I think we have those skills, but at the same time, writing itself is kind of a solitary act for most people. And I think it's supposed to be that way. So there is an element of like patting your head and rubbing your stomach where you're writing and streaming at the same time that I think not every writer can manage. Well, I think all skills can be learned, but there's a certain unnatural aspect to it when you first get into like doing that very private act in a very public way.
Yeah, I've watched your stream quite a few times, and between you and Armand, and it is impressive how you guys are able to, you know, he doesn't narrate as much as you do. I feel like you narrate. He more like mumbles like to himself. Like I feel like he would be doing that even if we weren't watching. But you are actually clearly dictate pretty much the entire story. And not only that, but there's an active chat that goes on. And sometimes the chat gets out of control, especially when I get on there and I start talking shit to like Frank or something like that, which is always fun. But
there's a certain skill to managing that, being able to keep what you're going with and then interact with what's going on. And it's not all about money, but in terms of like creating a environment that's going to make people want to support, that sort of skill is pretty important to getting the back and forth in. And it is very different. You know, if someone just came into my office and started interrupting me while I was writing, that would not work well. But, you know, the chat is a little bit, you know, it's a little bit different, but it's a similar idea. It's kind of managing an interruption and making it not an interruption, so to speak.
So you do answer questions then, it sounds like, while you're
all the way through. And sometimes I'll do videos. I'll edit the video of the actual writing or editing or whatever I'm doing and put them up on YouTube and share them on Patreon. And then, you know, I'll take those stories I wrote and put them into a collection. So I've kind of figured out a way to make short stories profitable, essentially, by hitting all those different sources. And then I'll make, like, someone will ask a writing question or a life question or something. And, you know, I'm just answering off the top of my head, but then I'll take that clip and edit it down into something that almost looks planned. You know, this idea of like 4 steps to handling dialogue or whatever it is, even though I had no plan for it. You know, I can make it into a video with captions, and then I'll share those and draw more people in, either to my YouTube channel or the Twitch channel, or maybe eventually buy books as well.
And when streaming your writing, do you, Do you put a cap on the number of streams you'll do for a particular project as not to give too much of it away to the audience in advance, or do you like show them front to back?
There's certain unusual rules. So again, like technically, if I write a short story on stream, it's already been published. So it would be a secondhand story or a reprint at that point. But this is so new that it kind of varies from publisher to publisher what they think. So if I'm writing something for a publisher, I'm not going to do it on stream. I do that separately. And then I just write a new short story on. So when I come on to, or something that I'm going to self-publish where those rules don't matter. So if I know I'm putting something out for a specific anthology, that's an off-stream write. Whereas I just come up with the title, I sit down and I write a short story from beginning to end in one stream. And then on that same stream, I'll edit the story from the previous day, and then I'll read one of the stories that I did earlier. So I kind of get up to about the 2 or 3 hour mark, which is kind of the magic moment in terms of the Twitch algorithms when you're getting people in, and it gives multiple breakpoints where new viewers can come in and join in on something, as opposed to like if I wrote a 3 hour story, if I was writing a novel, then everybody's coming in the middle of something and can't necessarily follow along. Although in November, I do write an entire novel from beginning to end. I do my NaNoWriMo live on Twitch. So I'll do about 2,500 words a day. And then over 20 straight days, I have an entire novel written. And that ended up being a zombie novel that's actually done pretty well for me. But again, probably I couldn't hand that off to a publisher because, again, it's all been broadcast, the entire thing. So unless a publisher decided they were okay with that, technically everything that I do on Twitch becomes a reprint the moment I'm done with it. Now, again, that probably doesn't work for most writers because most people, writing a short story and having it instantly become a reprint would be a money problem. But for me, I write the short story, I've made money on Twitch. I put the short story up on Patreon, I make money on Patreon. I take the short story and I put it into a collection that I self-publish, I make money on that. And then I never have this fear that like, oh, I'm going to run out of ideas or I'm going to run out of stories. I'll sit on Twitch and write 31 stories in 31 days and then still write 2 or 3 more that I put into a collection. And if anything, Twitch kind of helps me filter out. Like I'm not afraid to write a bad story. And so on Twitch, I'll write, not all 31 of those stories are going to go into the collection because not all of them are good. And a few of them, if I do 31 in a row, a few of them will be great. And that's usually where the magic is. But like that idea that I can write 31 stories in a month and then somebody wants something for an anthology and I can take another idea and write that well enough to make it into the anthology as well. I kind of, ghostwriting helped me with that too. That idea of kind of losing the fear that like I only have 5 good stories in me, so I don't want to waste them, making one a reprint or putting one in Patreon or that kind of thing. So I'm never going to run out of stories to write. I got an entire board full of titles that are potential, and then another one will come to me, and I'll either put it down on a Post-it for the next Twitch stream, or go ahead and put it on the board for something that I want to let percolate for later. But yeah, for me, I just kind of reached a point where just producing the stories themselves is kind of the reward, and then I figure out what the professional side of that looks like on the back end when I need to, pay the bills and that kind of thing.
That's crazy.
Now,
I'm sorry, Daniel.
No, go ahead, Roland.
So, like, considering you're doing this full time, do you have like a routine that you follow? Like, do you set a certain amount of time during the day to write? What's your routine?
Usually the morning. Like I just kind of get up, get going, and come straight to the chair, and then put in whatever my minimums are. I don't track word counts anymore. I know you need to do it a little bit if you have a deadline, but I'll usually do word minimums. So like if I got 3 projects I'm working on, I'll do 1,000 words on each one. It's kind of my goal. Sometimes I'll go way past that. Some days I'm coming in and I don't feel well and I don't do anything. But I kind of hit those minimums and then I don't track anymore. And especially if I'm coming up on a deadline, I'll push myself to do a lot of words on one project real quick. But I tend to just have those things. I do, in terms of organization, I do Trello boards for the month. So like everything I plan on writing that month, including like the the stuff for my newsletter, the stuff I need to do for Crystal Lake, whatever it is, the stuff I need to do for Patreon, stuff that's every month, all that stuff, I figure out what days it's going to work. So I could pull up my Trello for October, and it's not complete yet, but I already have the structure there that shows what I'm doing in the month of October, and other things will kind of plug in. Of course, doctor's appointments come in, and then you move things to the left or right.
Yeah.
And then when the month is coming up, I transfer everything to Post-its that I have right on my desk. So if the internet's down, I can still do my work. And then that's kind of where I fine tune. So when I realize, I've been way too ambitious for the month of June and I need to cut some things out, I do that. But like right now on the Post-it, I could look at July 22nd and tell you exactly what I have planned to write on July 22nd. And so a lot of that is, if I'm working on a novel, 20 or 25 of the days will have that novel on there as one of the things, in addition to other stuff that's on. So it's all written down. Now in my head, I can't tell you what I'm writing. Like I have Wednesday in front of me, but I can't tell you from my head what I'm writing on Thursday. It's already written down. I'll get to it when I get to Thursday.
Gotcha.
But I have sort of that list of things to do. Sometimes I'll do time blocking, where you give it an hour. So especially if I'm doing an edit of some kind that's going to be long term, I'll work for an hour, however many chapters I'm going to get through. If it's writing, I'll usually go to a certain point. I don't usually time it. But I'd use various techniques like that to just get through my day. But it's mostly morning. If I don't get started in the morning and I get started late in the day, I'm probably not going to be as productive. So running from noon to 3 is not as valuable to me as going from 8 to 10. But some of that depends on what's going on that day and how I'm feeling. And especially with all the health stuff I've had going on this year and previous years, I give myself permission to fail. So if I'm having a bad day, if I have 3 bad days in a row, I'll not do anything productive. But I've also done this long enough to where, for a lot of writers, if you take 3 days off, they may not get back to it. Like you may have burned a month. Whereas for me, again, I don't track the days, so I don't track my word counts. I don't track how many bad days I've had in a row. So every day is a little bit new. And I've been doing this long enough that even if I have like a 2 or 3 day dry spell, I can come back on the 4th day as if nothing happened. So I know that doesn't work for everybody. I know not tracking word counts doesn't work for everybody. But that's sort of where I'm at. But again, it's best if I start in the morning. So if I don't sit down pretty soon after waking up, chances are I'm not going to get very much done that day.
That's a really interesting method, because we've talked to a lot of authors, and it always interests me to hear how people write, like how they go about their day when they sit down to write. I know your Twitch stream is generally at like 3 p.m. usually, right?
Yes.
It's a little bit later in the day. I just want to ask you one more thing about Twitch, and then we'll get off that, because it does fascinate me. But do you think it would be valuable for someone that's not a full-time writer, or is there a certain amount of time you should really put into Twitch? Like I know you and Armand do it, but you guys are both full-time writers.
Well, yeah, Twitch especially, and then any platform or endeavor you're doing in writing, consistency is pretty important. The only thing that could possibly be more important than consistency is content. So if you have 0 people watching, your goal is to raise the quality of your content. So whatever that is. Now on Twitch in particular and other platforms, almost to the same degree, Patreon, everything else, you need to find the thing that differentiates you from people that are doing almost the same thing you're doing. So you steal from those people. You steal from people who are excelling on the platform, even if they do something different from you, and you figure out how it applies. But at some point, you got to figure out what makes me different than the other people that are there, even if it's a small thing, even if it's something community related or interaction related as opposed to content related. But in that entire process of raising the quality of what you do, you got to be working on the content that you're creating for that. Your goal is to excel at that. One of the reasons I picked 3:15 to do my streams, even though that's later for me, is on a busy day that gives me time. So like if I'm trying to get a lot done other places, I'm almost always finished before 3:15. Like the only exception would be if I have a bunch of meetings or something that particular day. in which case I probably just drop some things and move them to the next day. But that's kind of why I picked that time, is that it gets me like I won't say never because that's not true, but typically I'm not working right up to 3:15. So that's just a time where if I get to that point, I'm ready to quit what I'm working on anyway. So I can go on and just do my Twitch thing, which is kind of in its own space. Although editing the videos and editing the stories off screen take up time as well. But yeah, content and consistency are pretty important. And I guess that's true of most things in writing. And some of that's true just because of the amount of time it takes. Like a lot of times, not just in writing, but in anything, and especially creative endeavors, people tend to give up too soon. That's usually the big mistake. Now, there is the other option where you don't give up soon enough. Like there's stuff you need to quit. And it's hard to discern what those things are. So there's always exceptions to what I'm saying, I guess. But it's more likely that something's going to take 21 days to be successful than 7 days. And it's more likely that something's going to take 3 months to be successful than 20 days. And then this is where you get into the point where you're not sure if you need to quit or not. There's points where you're looking at 3 years to get to success as opposed to 3 months. And then you kind of have to decide, okay, is this that kind of project? Is this that kind of thing where either I'm getting enough side benefit from it that it's worth pushing it for 3 years before things hit, or is it the kind of thing that if I want to be successful at it, it's going to require 3 consistent years of my time while it's still small. And I think that's the place that a lot of people kind of fall off. I know working full-time or writing full-time since 2013, there are several moments along the way that I should have quit. Like money was tight. There were no prospects, all this kind of stuff. And like every reasonable, responsible person would say, okay, it's time to quit this. It's time to get back to the day job, which again, there's nothing wrong with that. I don't want to make the implication that you're not successful as a writer if you have a day job. That's not what I'm saying. But with my goal being to do this full time, there were moments where every indicator was I should quit, and I just chose not to. Like I was just stubborn and selfish or whatever you want to say, and I pushed on, and then something came through, made it work, and we were able to move on. So like being full time from 2013 to now was really just an exercise in refusing to quit, and that was kind of more important than any of the other successes that I had. The idea that I didn't quit before I got to something that landed.
Yeah, I think if you're a resourceful person and you're passion driven and you're generating income, you know what I mean? And you've sort of figured these things out. Like you said, there's, the peaks and valleys kind of situation. But it's like, if it's ultimately what you love, you got to do it. You got to find a way. But for you, I'm just curious, was there any, like you said, there were moments that you really you should have quit. How did you get through those moments? Did you just, because that's a part of the thing that I think is interesting too. It's like, did you sacrifice certain comforts and things like that just to be like, yeah, I'm going to do writing no matter what?
Oh, yeah, well, that's a huge part of it. Like part of the financial, most of that discussion is financial. So like if if you have $1 million in the bank, you can do whatever you want. So the fact that you have to kind of decide, is it time to quit or not, is almost always financial. Which then connects to, your emotional, your relationships, everything else. When you're causing financial trouble because you decided to write about zombies instead of teach school. Some of it is just selfishness. Like it's just that idea that like once I stepped out of the classroom, like I told my wife that I can stay home, I can take care of our son while he's having trouble, and then I can always go back. I have my certificate, I can go back in a year. But I had no intention of going back. Like I was going to do whatever it took, legal or otherwise, to make that work. Like there was no way I was stepping back in the classroom. There was no way in hell. And so like, I guess some of that was just that idea of that refusal. Some of it's the stuff you go through. So like a lot of my challenges are health related. So in 2013 up through 2016 and so forth, my kidneys were failing. I had polycystic kidney disease, and essentially I was dying in slow motion. And so I was dealing with that. I had the transplant. There was some recovery from that. I had some brain stuff that I'm still dealing with. I actually got some things going on this week related to that. And then of course, I had a heart attack at the beginning of 2022 that I've been recovering from. But eventually you have all those big things and you find a way to survive those. And then a lot of the bullshit that people get upset about, I can't make myself care. Like, and not that I think going through these things has made me a more empathetic person. So like I care about, like, when people talk about going through depression or things they're dealing with, that stuff sticks in my brain. Like I remember that about them and it makes me care about them. But like people getting upset about politics, which is a valid thing to get upset about, people getting upset about turmoil in the industry, all this stuff, I don't have the capacity to take on those cares in addition to all the other stuff I'm surviving. So in a sense, a lot of those things kind of pass over me because I don't, it's not even in the top 10 of things I'm dealing with that day or that year, so like a lot of like people will get geared up about something that a publisher's doing, or I even have a publisher now that I'm working with. It's kind of squirrely and has a bunch of things wrong with them, but like it's almost to a point where it's almost like performance theater for me. Like I just want to see how long I can go through it, and like, can I actually publish successful books through these people that can't seem to get their shit together? And whereas, like a normal reaction would be to be upset. Like, again, it's not even the top 100 things that I'm dealing with this year. So it's almost like it can't infiltrate. Like I got too much else going on. And then when you're talking about like getting through a point like that, you'd mentioned, making certain sacrifices. There's a huge difference between needs and wants, and depending on what you really, really want in life, if you're willing to give up some of your other less important wants, it's amazing how small the financial cost of your needs actually are. So, you cut a bunch of non-essentials and you get down to house, food, and family, and then suddenly it's not quite as much money to get to where you need to survive each month. Now, for a long time, that was very tight. Like my wife being supportive was very helpful. But, I had a wife and 2 kids, and I was deciding to write for a living back before I really should have. So I was putting a burden on the family for sure. And you could make an argument for it being very selfish that I chose to pursue that. But again, being willing to shrink my lifestyle down far enough to where I was able to scrape by until things kind of started happening helped a lot. Now things are better and our lifestyle is expanded back out. So we have a bunch of non-essentials that we pay for now that were things to get tight again, that we could probably cut back a lot of stuff and be better off. But again, at those tight times, if you're willing to tighten up, you can get through it. But then, there were things like not paying bills on time and things like that, especially with all the medical stuff I had going on that I went through in order to live the way I wanted, and then caught back up later. So I was doing a lot of things that financially responsible people would consider non-negotiables, like letting bills slide and stuff like that. But a lot of it had to do with shrinking the lifestyle down during tight times to be able to continue to do what I wanted to do. And
you mentioned ghostwriting too. Before, I'm sorry if I jump in front of anybody for a question, but while we have that in the air, I want to talk about that for a second. Do you ever fear that, because I think we talked about this with Carver.
Ron O'Kelly too.
And
he did
Ron.
A lot of ghostwriting.
Yeah, it's like, and we were like, do you ever fear that like you're going to write that story that's like the next fucking Harry Potter or something, and it goes away and it's given to somebody else? Or like, is there any, because I don't know, I'm just speaking from my own perspective, like I get real attached to my work,
right?
Like I don't know how to explain it, I guess, but
no, I get it. You would probably be a terrible ghostwriter.
Yeah, I'd be fucking miserable the whole time.
Yeah, it's a different mindset, and this is what I tell everybody that asks me about it. You have to be so confident in your own ability that you're willing to let go of what you wrote. It's not mine anymore. Now, it helps that a lot of it's I'm writing genres that I wouldn't write on my own anyway. But, characters you create, scenes that you create, funny lines of dialogue, all that stuff feels very important. One thing that I became very confident about was that I was never going to run out of stories. So ghostwriting helped me a great deal in defeating writer's block, because there's an endless number of paths that any story can take. There's no real dead ends. They feel like dead ends because we're afraid of getting the story wrong, but there are none. There are 0 dead ends, and you can write a billion versions of any one story premise. Now, one thing that made me successful as a ghostwriter was I was willing to give my A game, whereas most people at best will do B or C work because they're saving the good stuff for themselves. So just the fact that I was willing to come in and give my best effort on whatever shitty idea this person was hiring me to write just automatically put me at a different tier than most writers, because I wasn't afraid of losing my good stuff. And in the scenario you're discussing, the worst case scenario is that I ghostwrite Harry Potter and it makes millions of dollars. And then who is that person coming back for the second book, and when I'm going to ask them for more money? So like your worst case scenario is kind of an ideal for me, is the fact that I ghostwrite something amazing and then I can set my own rate for when they come back and I'm set. And again, like I'm going to die before I write all the ideas I have. And then in the process of writing all the ideas I have, I'm going to have more ideas that I'm not going to have a chance to write. So I just have a mindset that I'm never going to run out of ideas. And sometimes that confidence, whether it's partially puffed up or not, helps me actually make that real, that idea that like I can sit down with the story idea and write whatever I want. But most people can't do it. Like you can't write great characters, great story, something you're proud of, and then hand it to somebody else to put their name on. I can walk through, not as much anymore because I don't do it as much, but I could walk through a bookstore and find 2, 3, 4, 5 books in nonfiction, fiction, different genres that I had written, but someone else's name was on it and was doing better than my stuff because it had their name on it. I've had publishers hire me to write books for name authors that I have to walk past in conventions and pretend like we don't know each other. And there are certain gatekeepers that run respected companies would hire me to write their stuff. But then they wouldn't accept stories in my own name when I submitted them. So I would just stop submitting to them. So there was a little bit of disillusionment to it. But there was also kind of this fuck you, I'm that good kind of confidence that came with it. Like that my name's not on this, but if you put someone else's name on my work, it's a bestseller. So I'm that good. I am that good. And when someone else is successful with my writing, and it would be very disheartening for a lot of people to learn how many people I know who use ghostwriters, authors that people love and enjoy and all that. Ones I've worked for, ones that, I submitted bids for and didn't get accepted, but had to sign a NDA in order to just bid on the project. But some of it was disillusioning where, I didn't want to be around some of these people because, again, they were getting praised and I had to pretend like I didn't know them. But also the kind of attitude where it demystified the whole success of writing, this idea that like, I know I'm that good because my work has achieved that if you just put someone else's name on it. So it really has nothing to do with the quality of what I write. It's just, I have to get my name that high. Like people have to recognize my name that much and then I'm set. Because it's already worked. I've already seen proof of concept when you put the work out there with somebody else. So again, like most people can't handle that. That would be a nightmare scenario for many writers, and that's why most people probably couldn't make a good living at ghostwriting, just because it would be destructive to their own creative process, and especially when it was my primary source of income. I was writing 10 and 12,000 words a day, which I can't do anymore. But most of it was for other people. And so I was writing that much, but getting almost nothing done for myself. So that was difficult. But again, like the rent is due at the end of every month. So I needed to knock out a 60,000 word romance novel in a week and a half in order to get paid, the $6,000 I needed for that and, bills and whatever else was coming up. But, it beat the shit out of a day job, so I was fine with it.
Now, Jay, how does does somebody get into that though? Like, how does somebody get into ghostwriting? Is it like a fucking secret handshake, or
it's the Wild West? The easiest path is through the websites, so things like Freelancer and Upwork and things like that. There were better websites in the past. So when I first started, there was a website called Elance, and it was just, most of the stuff on those sites is like, I want to pay you $5 to write a novel. And there's people in foreign countries that'll actually take that deal. And there's a ton of jobs like that. It's all reputation based. So you kind of have to take a few shitty jobs, do really well, get 5-star ratings, work your way up to what you want. I had done so well on those sites that I was able to pick and choose. Like I never cold bid on anybody. They always came to me. Now those sites, again, Elance got bought out by Upwork, which was a shittier company and that gouged you on more things. I had built up a reputation to where I didn't have to use the sites anymore. So I was working directly with people and did pretty well with that. But it's a rough start. Like you either have to find companies that are willing to pay you for freelance writing and build a reputation that way, or you have to start with the websites, work a few shitty jobs, build up a reputation, and then start bidding on jobs that are better. And then eventually you want to get off those sites and get all your money directly, so someone's not taking a cut. So you just kind of, and it's difficult because, again, I had to walk this line where I needed everybody to know I did it, but I couldn't tell anybody who I worked for. So building a reputation that you don't share names is pretty good. But then you still kind of have to talk about it enough to where people know that you do it and get the impression that you do it well, that kind of thing.
It's really an interesting topic, and I don't think we've only talked about it a little bit. That's why I wanted to talk about it a little bit today. But I'd be interested to hear what Roland and Dan think too, because for me, like I kind of had that. I had a realization that, like you, Jay, there's never going to be a shortage of ideas. More than likely, I actually got a little depressed. Like, more than likely, I'm probably going to not be able to get all my ideas out, which is kind of a sad thing. I mean, the ones I have now, those will get written, but God willing. But I've come to the realization that as they continue, it's probably not all going to happen. But to me, it's about I want to build a legacy. So it's not so much for me that, maybe I can't write a story that's as good as this one that I'm going to give to this person. It's that I just want that to be part of my library. Like, I want to have an insane library when I die, for whatever reason. I mean, but that's sort of my thing with it. And I don't, like you said, I think I'd be a shitty ghostwriter, but I'm interested to hear Dan and Roland's take on that, because I don't think we've talked about this. So I think it's interesting.
Go ahead, Roland.
Oh, with me?
Yeah, I'll let you start off. Yeah, age before beauty.
As slow as I write, I'm not as fast as you guys, and the ideas don't come to me as easily. I have to sit down and focus on the story. So I know I could never do it. I feel like when I write, I want to write something that kind of hasn't been done before. And I know they say it all's been done before, but I still think I can put my own twist on my stories. So that makes it even harder because I feel like I need to think of this awesome, amazing idea that nobody's ever written, which that's not even possible. Well, not true, because unfortunately, nobody's ever written that.
I think I'd probably be a pretty shitty ghostwriter too, because I'm egotistical, and I kind of want to see my name up there, which is why I don't use a pen name. But I think if I was going to do something along that vein, I would use a pen name. And if I want to write a different genre per se, I would use a pen name. That way I know that it's me. And if I want to spill the beans and tell people, then I can be like, hey, you think I only wrote 20 books, but here's another 30 books in 3 different genres. And fuck you, I write more than you, kind of thing. And this is really me. It's like pulling the mask at the end of Scooby-Doo there. So, I mean, the ghostwriting thing definitely sounds great for a full-time writer who's just focusing mainly on an additional source of income, because it does sound like it's if you can get going with it, it sounds like you can make a lot of money doing this. But again, I like to see my name on that front cover as well. But if I was paying the bills at writing, then yeah, I would probably seek it out and just ghostwrite something in a different genre and just be like, all right, I'm never going to look at this again. I pray to God it doesn't make them millions and millions of dollars, and then I'm screwed out of it. But like you said too, Jay, if I do write something that does, get Harry Potter status, then they are going to want to come back for the next 8 books, and then maybe we can add a few zeros on the end and see
Right.
where we're at. So.
Jay,
But,
has it always been horror? Was that your original first love?
Yeah. When I started writing, I was writing only zombie stories when I first started. And then I kind of expanded into other horror and then expanded into other genres from there. So in a sense, I didn't even always think of zombie stories as horror. That was just kind of the, I guess apocalyptic literature or whatever.
Yeah.
So even now when I write horror, obviously scary is the base emotion, fear. But I've always kind of been interested in writing other emotions. If you think of like emotions as colors, and you're painting in different colors, brights and darks, and sometimes the brights make the darks stand out in contrast. So like one thing I think ghostwriting helped me with, I'm glad when I don't have to do it. So I'm glad when things are going well enough that I can just say no to everything. But one thing I think was really valuable is, I was writing a lot of romance, I was writing a lot of fantasy, I was writing a lot of nonfiction, and there's tools in all those genres that can be pretty novel somewhere else. So unbeknownst to a lot of people, I use a lot of techniques from romance when writing horror, and I'll use it for non-romantic relationships. So if you use the tools that make a romance relationship work for those readers, that make them want to buy every book about those characters, and then you apply it to a platonic friendship, and then you build a friendship between two people that feels as strong as what those romance readers get from that book, people don't realize you're pulling a fast one on them. They don't realize that you're using the emotional tools, maybe even the emotional manipulation of a romance story to make them care about these friends and what happens to them, and when their friendship is falling apart or when it's coming back together. And when you get that undertone going in a horror story, it feels more powerful. So stealing some of those tools from other bags and using them in places that they're not supposed to be used, I think helps a great deal. But then it also kind of expands you beyond horror, where you can write a good steampunk story or a fantasy story or science fiction, and it's just at some point it's just about the story. I almost always default to horror. So if there's not some compelling draw to something else, I sit down with a title on Twitch, I'm probably writing a horror story, although sometimes it'll bleed into crime fiction. And so a lot of times I'll kind of experiment out, but it's almost like the story is king, that just the idea of here's a story that didn't exist before. But I'm almost always going to draw in. Like I specifically try to not write zombie stories. So if I'm going out, if I feel that temptation, I try to fight it as much as I can, and then only write one when it's the best option, So a lot of times I always end up going back to a zombie story, but it's against this effort that I put in to write something else, because that is how I'm naturally drawn. So I try to write something different. But a lot of times people will hire me to write one. A publisher will say, we're doing these novellas, and so we're going to do a zombie novella. So okay, well now I'm writing a new zombie novella. Or when I was doing the zombie novel on Twitch, I knew that I was writing live. I knew that I was going to have to be on for the entire novel. So I kind of went back to what was natural for me, so that there wouldn't be any trip ups, that I could, write a zombie story in my sleep, but I'm going to try to make this one great. And so that was the goal there. But yeah, I tend toward horror. So if I can't find the magnetism somewhere else, I'm almost always going to write a horror story.
Just real quick, like you used to teach, I'm sorry, Daniel. What did you teach? Was it, for some reason, I'm just thinking English because it flows so well. But what
I got a degree in middle grades education, which in Georgia was grades 4 through 8. But then I got hired for elementary school. So for the first several years, I taught 4th and 5th grade all subjects.
Okay.
And then every administration has their own education policy, which changes everything, and then it changes everything again. But No Child Left Behind was around when I was still teaching elementary. And one of the tenets of it was you had to be certified in every subject you taught, which I had a middle grades degree. So I only had 2 subjects on my certificate. So if I wanted to keep teaching elementary, I had to get every subject on my certificate. And you could be grandfathered in if you took all the tests. So I took all the tests, and I had every subject on my certificate. I could teach math. I could teach everything. So I moved states to South Carolina. And in South Carolina, the middle grades degree only covers 5 through 8. So there's really only one grade level that I could teach in elementary, which made me really invaluable to them. So I started I'd started teaching in middle school as well, because at one point I was thinking about going into administration. So I was trying to expand my experience. And so when I came up here, I had to interview with some middle schools. And the fact that I had every subject on my certificate when most teachers only have one, they loved it. Like, it was great for getting a job. But then it really sucked after you had a job, because I was kind of like the utility player on the baseball team, where like whatever position was open, that's what I taught. So I could never really get great at anything. Like, I'd be teaching 6th grade social studies, and I'd be doing 7th grade math the next year, and then I'd do 8th grade English, and then it's back to science, but now I'm in 7th grade. And then if you had a grade level where you had to teach 2 subjects, well, that's me. I'm going to go in and teach 2 different subjects. So, one thing was they could never track me. So test scores didn't matter, because, if I did a bad job teaching science in 7th grade, it doesn't matter if now I'm teaching math in 6th grade. So every year was starting over. But I taught everything. So at some point I taught almost every subject, almost at every grade level, but I was all over the place. We had one group of kids that came up. I don't know if there was a snowstorm the year they were born or whatever, but there was like almost 2 full classrooms of extra kids for this grade level. So I ended up moving up with them all 3 years, because they needed extra teachers that could teach just about anything. So I taught these kids in 6th grade. I taught them in 7th grade. I taught them in 8th grade, and they started calling me. I don't know if you're familiar with Boy Meets World, but there's the male actor in there kind of started out as their teacher and then became their principal and then went to college with them and all that kind of stuff. And so they kept calling me Mr. Feeney, because I kept following them up every grade level. And it's funny,
Mr.
actually,
Feeney,
that group, out of that group of kids, I got to the 8th grade with them, and I knew the names of the kids on the other team. So kids I didn't even teach, I knew them all by name and could like yell at all of them in the hallway to slow down, even if I didn't teach them. And I could do my seating chart before the kids even showed up, because I already knew them all and knew who they couldn't sit by and all that stuff. And actually today, I've been in cardiac rehab from the heart attack. So I have to go exercise in a hospital 3 days a week. And there's like an intern in there that's been there for about a month. And he just recognized today that I was his teacher in 8th grade. So he was actually in that group of kids, and I taught him social studies in 8th grade. And now he's like the doctor making sure my heart doesn't explode when I'm on the treadmill. So
Hope you didn't fuck with him back then.
I have terrible memory. Unfortunately for me, he didn't recognize me for about a month, so it was okay that I didn't recognize him. But I literally have medical memory problems. It's something they're checking me for right now. And so I was like apologizing to him. He's like, oh, no, it's fine. And a lot of these kids, I ended up teaching them science. And like, I didn't know shit about what I was teaching. Like, I know some stuff, but again, like I would teach science 1 year and then move on. So it's a very complex subject with a lot of stuff. And I didn't know the stuff. Like, I was figuring it out one lesson ahead of all the kids. And really the only thing that I did for them was, I had the book with the answers in it, but I tried to not take the fun out of it. So like whatever was going on, whether I could do a good job teaching it or not, I made sure I didn't not make it fun. So like make sure I didn't make it too much like school, that the experiments would be fun. And so a lot of those kids ended up going into like, I don't know, I don't think it's because of me necessarily. A lot of them give me credit, but they ended up going into like science fields and medicine and things like that. And of course they're way beyond my knowledge. Like I literally barely know the 7th grade material I was teaching them, and now they're microbiologists and doctors and things like that. And a lot of times, kids will give their teacher credit, whatever teacher they had the most fun with. They'll usually say, oh yeah, that's the teacher that taught me everything. When in reality, they kind of got motivated and did the work themselves, but they'll give the credit to their 7th grade science teacher who didn't who didn't really understand the experiment, was just kind of winging it, So that again, that's I guess the long answer to that question of teaching. I enjoyed it when it was going well, but there's a lot of stuff in education that was just bullshit, and it was fun. Like, not teaching's a lot more fun than teaching. So I'm glad to be a writer now.
Jay, I want to talk about some nonfiction stuff that I've seen a lot of, and that's with LitReactor.
Okay.
You write a lot of really great articles for LitReactor, and I was just wondering if maybe you could go over that, tell us about LitReactor and how you became a part of that.
I've been, again, you talk about diversifying income. I've been doing articles for various groups, and they sometimes it lasts for a while, sometimes it was over, and then you kind of move on to something else. So a lot of that's called staff writing, when you kind of work on the staff of something, and either you're paid by the piece or you're paid however. One of those people ended up recommending me to the editors at LitReactor. They asked for some samples. I sent them over, and then they kind of, every month you pitch. All the writers, an email goes out and you pitch what you want to write that month. Not everybody pitches every month. I pitch every month because I like money. And so I'll send them about 3 or 4 titles that I am interested in writing, and they usually pick 2. So I almost always get 2 articles a month. Some of the same things that help me in ghostwriting help me in this, like writing quickly, writing well, turning in my stuff on time. Apparently with LitReactor, if you turn in your articles on time, that puts you in like the top 1% of contributors they have, because apparently that's a ongoing problem that writers aren't good about turning in their articles on time. So a lot of times one of my articles will be right at the beginning of the month, because they know that I'll get mine done the month before. But through the month, when an article idea comes to me, and again, they're not the only ones I write for, so I got to come up with a lot. I'll write it down on a Post-it and know what I'm pitching that month when they ask. But sometimes, like, I get caught, like I only have 1, maybe 2 ideas, and then I just write when I'm sitting at the email. I just come up with something and put it down, even if I'm like highly unqualified to write it. And a lot of times those are the ones that get picked, and then I got to figure out, oh God, who do I talk to figure out what this is, because I have no idea how it works. Or it'll be like an expose on somebody, just some random person that I don't think has had an article about them, and then I have to contact them and figure out, okay, we need to sit down and have an interview or a conversation where I can write this article. And of course, most people are grateful. They like that there's people willing to talk about them. But sometimes the articles that I end up writing are the ones that I had to come up with at the last minute, just so I had 3 or 4 for them to choose from, so that I had a better chance of them picking 2 for that particular month.
That's awesome. Yeah, I've been following that, obviously, your LitReactor articles, and it actually brings me to another point, because it was one of the big things you talked about in one of the articles was the books of horror, and we had mentioned them earlier. Those of you that don't know, which if you've listened to the show before, you probably have heard of Books of Horror. Books of Horror is a group on Facebook that is, I think, at 22,000 members right now. Mm-hmm. Heavily moderated, very well, policed, I guess you'd say, by the admins. And it is a group for readers and writers alike. There's not a lot of BS on there, and if there is, you're usually booted out quickly. When I met Jay for the first time in person at Scares That Care AuthorCon, which I want to talk about as well later on, Aaron and I, we sat down with Jay for breakfast one morning. We talked about the Books of Horror group, and then lo and behold, we kind of found out that a decent amount of the patrons at the AuthorCon were Books of Horror members. So Jay, now you've gone to a few conventions after that. What do you think of the group, and have you seen them more now that you know what to look for out in the world?
Yes, I was at a convention in Texas, and there were Books of Horror people there too. So they're everywhere, and the interesting thing is that, like, the super fan, obviously every genre has them, but they're normally thought of as like a romance thing. So you have these romance readers, and there was a convention where an established romance convention where some of the participants, when they were asking for feedback, said they would like to see some other genres. So some of the people who read paranormal romance wanted some straight horror authors that they could look at some of their books, and same thing with fantasy and so forth. So they ended up picking horror and invited a number of horror authors, including myself. Armand was there. There's several others. I don't want to start naming names because then I'll leave people out. But we went into this foreign world. It's completely different from a horror convention in a bunch of ways. So it was like being on another planet. But you would have there was one day where you did a bunch of events during the convention, and then Sunday for just a few hours was the only time the vendor's room was open, and it was the only thing open at that point. And you'd have all these readers come up, and they just pick the books they wanted. They barely talk to you, then walk off to the next table, and they'd buy all the books they're going to read that year, hundreds of books. And I had a woman come up and looking at the books, and I was 3 books into a zombie series at that point, and it's pretty rough. There are 2 gay characters in it that are the main leads, and there's cuss words in the table of contents. It's very bawdy and over the top and that kind of thing. And I described these things to her, and she's like, that doesn't really interest me. And I'm like, yeah, it's not for everybody. Oh, I guess I was about 4 books in or something. I forget how many I had, but I kind of backed off. I was done selling because she wasn't interested, but she sat there and she kind of looked a little bit more, and she's like, all right, I'll just take the first 3 and give it a chance. And so she's not even interested, but she'll give 3 books a chance because that's such a low commitment for these super romance readers. So that's the kind of reader that they deal with. And it's why that genre excels. You didn't really have that in horror. Obviously, there's probably some, but it wasn't a big thing. I don't know if it's just books of horror. I don't know if it's the pandemic. I don't know if it's a combination of things. But in conventions, I started finding super readers, and there's a lot of them in books of horror group. That's where a lot of these super readers are gravitating to find their tribe or whatever. And so you have these readers that read at romance levels, but they're reading indie horror. And they're just buying everything. They're buying it faster than they can read it. They're piling it up in their Kindle. They're piling it up on their shelves, and they're getting to it. And they're reading fast, but not as fast as they buy. But they just keep buying and keep reading, and they'll push for a month to get caught up and all that. Some of them will glom onto one writer and buy everything that they write. And then even if you're not that author, you can just catch the periphery of them, and they buy 2 or 3 of your books, as well. So I think it's a different environment for horror. I don't think most horror authors have caught on to it yet. I don't think especially some of the established horror authors have caught on to it. More and more of them are joining books of horror based on the word of mouth that's gotten out there. So obviously they're picking up on that there's something special going on there. But I think books of horror is the place where it's congregating, but I think the bigger circle outside of that is that we've developed either through the pandemic or through online living, have developed a larger quantity of super readers in horror that didn't used to exist before. And I think it's probably going to change the genre. I don't know how long it lasts. I don't know what 2 years down the line looks like, but it's not the same market it was pre-pandemic.
That was actually another question I wanted to ask you, because you've been around longer than us in this industry. Where do you see horror going right now? I know you said that, we're kind of on a rise with books of horror and these super readers emerging, but in your experience and in your past, what you've seen then as opposed to now, and where do you think that this is all going? Is there going to be another crash? Are we getting too big where it's going to start getting flooded again like it was in the 90s, and then we had that the crash of then? Or do you think that we're going to continue on this meteoric rise and it's just going to go up and away? What do you think is going to happen here?
It's hard to say. The pattern in horror especially, but genre writing more generally, is that a few people get into a thing early and make it work really well, and then everybody else rushes in and dilutes it. So there's some of that. Anything that's working great it's going to be tougher once more and more people try to get onto it. Whether it's TikTok or Patreon or whatever it is, when everybody starts to rush in now, there's going to be a lot more white noise going on. When ebooks first came out, everybody who put out an ebook made a fortune, and now obviously it's almost like ebooks are traditional publishing now again, and that's kind of how a lot of those things work. I think it's a lot of technology based. I think there's more avenues to publish. So I think horror genre, and then all writing, you're looking at changes in what publishing means. So, you had traditional publishing, you had ebooks, now you have self-publishing, now you have, Patreon, maybe Twitch, maybe something else down the line. But it's all these differences in how you publish that are coming along, and it's almost all going to be technology based, I think. I've found that typically porn tends to adopt technology the earliest. So if you can figure out what porn is doing that's different, that's usually going to be what gets followed later. So like all the sorts of, they were doing DVDs first, they, whatever form of media you can name, pornography does it first, and then other media tends to lag behind it. And so I think maybe the one exception was podcasts. They didn't really do much with podcasts. Although, live streaming and video podcasting, they were big on. So that's kind of some of that I noticed because it was part of the ghostwriting. Like I was ghostwriting for a few of those sites, and you'd kind of notice that they would get to a thing first and be making a lot of money at it, and then that's where media followed. But I do think maybe that's similar to horror. I think that a lot of times horror as a genre chases media. So whatever everybody else is doing, we kind of fall in it later, figuring out where we fit in more broadly. So it's hard to say. I think obviously there's, like we talked about, ebbs and flows in terms of finances. So there's times where it's easier to do well. There's times where it's harder, but I don't know that I think horror authors would benefit by not trying to apply the general rule to their specific situation. So obviously there's general practices that are best, but the idea that most horror authors are doing poorly doesn't mean you have to do poorly, because the general rule doesn't always apply to you. And so we have a lot of prognosticators in horror that are always seeing a crash coming and that sort of thing. And some of that's self-fulfilling, like we change our behavior to prepare for a thing that we think is coming. Whereas, even in the stock market crash and the Great Depression, there's somebody who has their best day. There's somebody who made money while everybody else was going bankrupt. And I think it benefits to be that person, to be the person that finds a way to do well during a crash, as opposed to joining everybody else on the woe is me way down, maybe.
No, that's yeah, I mean those are great points, because like you said, everybody's kind of chasing the next trend and chasing the technology and stuff like that, and we've seen it in horror, especially with like the rise of Godless, which has been around for a little over a year now, or I think a little over a year.
Just over a year.
With just doing primarily ebooks, and now they branched into audiobooks, so they're starting to do that stuff. They're starting to serialize certain things. And we see that
getting
also.
Games too.
Games, yep. Madness Heart Press has some games through them. And like we said too, with Amazon and Kindle and stuff, I think they had that Vela program, which I really didn't know too much about. So they're adapting as well, and people are trying to find the next best thing. And right now, we're starting to see more and more people create merchandise items. Every other day you see people putting up like Teespring, TeePublic, stuff like that, getting some cool designs, making T-shirts and putting them up there. And it seems to be, and I have one as well. Aaron does too. And
Christopher Triana has a good one. I've noticed his.
Triana has one. John Wayne Comunale has one. There's some other guys out there that have. I think Glenn Rolfe has something in the works as well. But it is definitely another, like you said before, another avenue of revenue for us to bring in. So definitely the technology thing. I don't know about the porn stuff unless we're doing like VR reading, but we don't talk about pornography on this show because this is a family show. It's very wholesome.
I'm sorry I introduced that idea to you guys when you had.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to Google the word. I'm not even sure what that means.
You know what the thing was though with the lack of success with the porn podcast is they were all the same. It was all
Carver's Pike. Carver's Pike was my favorite podcast there. So, grunting.
Yeah, no,
So,
I think like the you know the site stuff is awesome too. That we've been seeing everybody kind of bet on themselves. You know what I mean? And like, and I think it's awesome what Godless is doing. You know, there's like a lot of people that are finding a platform that might not otherwise have one or sort of have the time to invest into
Mhm.
maybe doing it themselves. Like one of my reasons and why I sort of stepped away was because I really wanted to um, do everything myself almost and be like since I'm writing full time, I want to be the one stop shop for everything. And it's like I like to see the brand be successful and like a lot of people be successful from it. But my idea is that like I want to direct everybody to my brand at this point. You know,
yeah.
I think I've got enough of a following to where I've got my diehards, you know, and I think I can do more special and unique things from them if I have the whole steering wheel in my hands on every aspect of what I'm creating. But you know, that's not to say I won't work with like publishers and things like that from time to time. But especially with learning more about using third-party printers and stuff. I mean, I did that very early in my career, but I really, especially with the success we had from Exits, the book that we released, you know, more of that's definitely going to come because I think people like that sort of unique, limited thing. And you know, if we have these e-commerce stores with this variety of products, it's like you could put unique things in there for them that you know they're going to be really grateful for. Um, but yeah, dude, it's awesome to have you because you've been doing it for so long, you know, and that's why I was really excited to talk to you. But I'm wondering what are some of the biggest challenges? I know you talked about obviously like the financial aspect of it, and you know, sort of having to, you know, reallocate funds and whatnot depending on what you're doing. But what are some of the biggest challenges maybe you've had more from the writing side rather than the financial? Is there any advice that you could give on?
Um, it's difficult not to chase what you think makes money. So westerns got popular a couple years ago, and they're on the rise. And there's Western publishers that are really happy to see that. But then you had a bunch of horror authors that decide to write westerns. Now, the thing I'll say is that a lot of them wrote really great westerns. Some of them horror westerns, weird westerns, but then also straight westerns. So you had authors that were applying skill. Now you see something like that and you decide, oh, maybe I should be writing a western. And so you kind of get into this existential dilemma of like, okay, do I actually have something to say about that, or am I just doing it because other people were successful with it? And am I going to be, you know, chasing the next werewolf romance or whatever that's suddenly popular? And is it what I really want to write? And then especially if you're working with publishers and they offer you an advance for something like that, then you're like, well, maybe I do want to write it, you know, that kind of thing. So there's a lot of ways to lose yourself in trying to figure out, okay, is this something I want to do, or is it something that I'm doing just because it's the market? And there's probably somewhere in the middle that's the right answer. You know, just that idea of like, I'm going to write the most obscure stuff that nobody gives a shit about and pretend like I can't even put it into a genre and then nobody wants to buy it because I can't explain what it is at a convention table. So like, there's probably some happy median where you are writing the thing that you want to write that the market actually wants. And so there's probably something in there. But there, and especially when I've struggled with health issues, I think I sense my mortality more than your average person. So I think like, I'm not in a situation where I'm going to die tomorrow or I'm going to die the day after, but I got a lot going on. And it kind of keeps present in my mind how fragile life is. So that sometimes can contribute to, I want to write everything I can while I can. But it can also contribute to the idea of like, do I actually give a shit about this? Is this, do I care about this story? Do I care about this story? Should I be writing this story? And so sometimes especially recently, I've become less and less interested in the business side of things while at the same time having to maintain those things. So, I'm continuing my newsletter, I'm continuing advertising and all the things that I do on the business side of things. But I care less and less and less about that as time goes on. And I just want to write the story. Every time I write a story, it's like, okay, here's one more thing I created in the world that can't be taken away in theory. I mean, obviously everything you do can disappear after enough years. But this idea that now this thing exists and it's not going to not exist. It's in the file. It's been published, whatever it is, whether it's good or bad. Even the bad stories, I'm proud that I wrote them. I'm proud that I started, finished, and made the story as good as it could be. And for a while, especially as I started to get a little success, I would look back at certain older stories. And there, I would be better at grammar now. I'd be better at, okay, this is what makes a good storyline. This is more cliche, all those kind of things that hone your stories and make them better, objectively better. But so it's not that I would be careful, but like, as I would start to do something, I'd be like, that's not best practice. There's actually a more, the audience would appreciate this more because it's not just like, all those kind of things. But, I would look back at an older story and it would be raw. It would have a lot of mistakes in it. It would break a lot of rules that I didn't know were rules, which is the worst way to break them. But there would be some kind of like raw drive to that story that I felt like was missing as I became better at writing. And I'd be like, how do I recapture that? Like, how do I keep all the things I've learned about the practice of writing, but recapture sort of that raw feel of just, I'm just writing the story because I want to. And more recently, I've kind of not been breaking rules, but just sort of ignoring them. Like, there'll be two options for where a story is going to go, and one of them is objectively better. It's like, it's a better story. It's a more well-honed plot, all the things that objectively make this the better way to go. But I want to go the worst way. Like, I want to go the way that alienates the audience. I want to go the way that is actually more cliche, that's been done more times. That's the story I want to write. So I'm just going to write that. Even though objectively I know it's making a worse story, that's the story I want to write. I'm just going to write it. And if it's a terrible story, I don't care. I'll write another story tomorrow. There's nothing that stops me from scavenging that story and writing it a different way later. But I've found that as I've sort of like given up on trying to write well, I've actually been more proud of the stories that I'm writing. So like writing the story the way I want to, without thinking so much about how the audience would react, which again is probably not best practice. That's not the best way to come up with a good story. But being in the position I am, health wise, and with the time I have left and that kind of stuff, like it's harder and harder for me to give a shit about things I'm supposed to be giving a shit about. And so just writing the story that I want to write, no matter how good or bad it's going to be, just because I'm going to be my own audience from now on, has actually kind of freed me from some of those things that got me away from some of that raw passion from when I was writing at the beginning, when I was just writing because I was driven to, as opposed to now this is my job for a living and that kind of thing. So I think you learn everything you can. Learn all the rules of grammar, learn the rules of story, learn why you're not supposed to have your character look in a mirror and describe themselves, learn why you're not supposed to have your character wake up at the end of a story and have it be a dream the whole time. Learn all those things that you're not supposed to do. But at the same time, write the fucking story you want to write, even if it's wrong, even if you know you're doing it wrong. Write it the way you want, just to see.
Yeah, it's like there's certain wrongs that are like, I don't know, more concrete wrongs, you know what I mean? Like, it's an obvious wrong. But then there's ones that, like, there's certain rules if you follow that, you might be missing out on writing something that really helps you take off too because it's unique. So I know it's like a weird line to toe, but I definitely see both sides to it, because what is it? Like, what is right? It's just what a bunch of people say it is, and it's like, you can do stuff certain ways. Like, like a lot of people frown upon using first person and third person in a book, and they say that that's unacceptable. You know what I mean? There's so many books but my most popular book, the one that let me write for a living, uses that at different points. So it really, it just depends. You know, you got to pick your spot, I guess. You know, if it's right, go with it. You know.
It's harder to do that well. So like if you're doing it wrong, it's harder to do it well. Like you're more likely to fuck it up than to get it right. Yeah, there's a certain power to writing the story that you want to write the way you want to write it. But again, you know, a publisher might not take it, or you know, an audience may hate it for the reasons that it's not the best way to do it. But the funny thing is, like, if you take the best literature from previous decades and you tried to sell it to a publisher today, it's the horror is probably more flowery. It probably has prologues in it. It probably takes longer to get to the action. The dialogue doesn't follow best practice. You know, so like all the things, like if you wrote those novels today, they would be rejected out of hand because we've decided that those things aren't best anymore. Like Faulkner would not be able to publish a novel now because his shit is too long. But there was a point where that was the best that was out there, you know? So like, could you write a novel like that now? Yes, of course you could. Now, could you sell it? I don't know. But then there's at some point where like, you know, is the market killing what you're creating? Like, is it hindering what you're trying to put out there? And I don't know. Cause like, I may not want to see your book full of mirror and scenes and dream sequences, cause that's usually shitty writing. But along those same lines, you know, you get down to, you know, how bloody do I want to make this scene? Is it better if some of it's off camera? And then like, you kind of have to decide, okay, have I done this before, that kind of thing. And all those things may get in the way of what you're doing. But then there's reasons to learn from it. Like, is there a better path for this? And sometimes if you don't learn new things, I'm kind of contradicting myself, but if you don't learn new things, then you're more likely to fall into cliche, which is more likely to make you fall into stereotypes. So like, if I want to write characters that are not me, like I want to write someone who's not a straight white middle-aged male, which will probably make my stories better if it's not packed with people like me. Then I'm choosing to write about other races. I'm choosing to write about other identities. And, you know, if you're going to do that well, you got to do it with respect. You got to write them as real people, and you kind of have to be conscious of what you're doing. And so if you just kind of do whatever you want without any thought to it, you're more likely to fall into stereotypes. So your character, when you're like, okay, they're going to run into a problem, and if I'm not thinking it through, I'm more likely to pick a stereotypical problem for that race or for that gender or for whatever it is. And I'm more likely to write a shitty version of that character that undermines the story. So whereas like I'm saying, like I want to throw all the rules out the window, sometimes obviously there's reasons to be conscious so that like, okay, I don't have to go down a stereotypical route with this. And if I realize that I'm writing a cliched character, I might do better to make this individual completely different from that, not try to encapsulate the entire group or identity, and rather just write a unique character that doesn't fall into all the checked boxes that a poorly thought out character would be. So again, I guess that's the counterpoint to the you know, write raw idea that I had there.
Absolutely. Yeah, I definitely agree. I think, you know, some rules are meant to be broken, others are there for a reason, and then some you can bend, you know, like there's all kinds of middle ground. But I'm thinking also, as far as, because I'm looking at time right now, we can probably do you have a couple more questions, Dan? Maybe actually we have listener questions, right?
We have listener questions. Yeah, I wanted to make sure we got to them because we do have I just looked at both the there were 2 threads I had put up on the Written in Red page, and I wanted to make sure we got to these questions.
Yes.
Some of them were answered already, but I think that they could probably use a little bit more from Jay. If you got some time left, and we're gonna go through some of these. Roland, do you have these up by any chance, or are you slacking over there as usual?
I have them.
Oh man, it caught me off guard, son. I thought you were gonna fucking be like, oh no,
Of course,
glasses are coming off.
Shaw's question first, so
You know, you're gonna start Matt Shaw's question. That's a finisher.
okay, we'll finish it with that one.
All right, go ahead.
Okay.
start it off, Roland.
No, I'm gonna skip that one. So Christina Pfeiffer,
Oh yeah.
to know, where did the inspiration for Seersucker Motherfucker come from?
There's an author.
Best fan.
There's an author named Sean Grigsby who's I don't know if flamboyant's the right word. He's bombastic. He has his own style, and he bought a seersucker suit, among many other colorful things that he has, and the caption was "Seersucker Motherfucker," and I asked him if I could use that as a title, and so he said he gave me permission. And then I constructed this story about this over the top two Southern families that are feuding over this unfortunate death. And it turns very Tarantino-esque, and the families destroy each other and that kind of thing. And so I created the story from the title idea, which I tend to do a lot. That story I had no plans for it. It was a weird length. So it was, in sort of that in-between length where it wasn't really a novella, all that kind of stuff, and barely qualified as a short story, that kind of thing. So that it was almost unsellable. And I put it into a collection called Beautiful Darkness that I only sold from my website. Wasn't on Amazon, wasn't anywhere else. I printed copies local, and I had the ebook up for sale and signed copies up for sale on my website. That was the only place this book existed. I took it to conventions, the copies, and sold them. I did a reading at one of the conventions. And then, so I can actually track exactly how many copies are sold. Like I know every copy that was sold because there was no outside agent. If I were trying to hide this story, I couldn't have hid it any better. And then all of a sudden I get a call that has been nominated for a Splatterpunk Award. And I'm trying for the life of me to figure out how enough readers found it. Like I sold a lot of copies, considering, but again, like to have enough to where the nomination would go through and all that. So I got nominated for that. Ended up putting it up on Godless as well, and that's kind of where it got a good bit of traction. But it's basically just these two Southern families that are exaggerated, and decide that they're going to have to. Only one of them can stand after this Sunday's over, and that's kind of how the orgy of violence breaks out that sort of matches up with that title. But it was Sean Grigsby's caption on Facebook for his seersucker suit.
I just finished reading it the other day, and the scene with the grandmother on the Gatling gun with the goggles on, I was like pissing myself laughing. She's like fucking mowing people down with this like Gatling gun. And I'm like, what the hell is this?
Off the church.
Yeah, it started all. I mean, the opening line is just excellent. It already paints the what's going to happen in that story. And I just picked up on Godless the other day. I shared it on Books of Horror, and it was just a fun, kind of just like you said. It seemed like you were trying to one up yourself at every scene. Like you were fighting yourself to beat yourself.
Yeah. And
obviously the ending was great too. But yeah, I really liked it.
I was surprised how many people responded to that, not just to the violence, but some of the lines. I tend to try to get poetic, no matter what I'm writing. Like write some kind of line that's going to move people. And there's a scene where the father describes how much he wants to deal out pain as a revenge, and questions whether God wants revenge as much as he does, and that kind of thing. And some of the metaphors that I used in that paragraph, obviously I was proud of them at the time, but I just kind of passed them off. And it's like this most quoted section of it, where he's talking about extinction level events and Aztecs and all this stuff that he brings in as metaphors to how much slaughter he wants to pay for this life that he cared about, kind of thing. And I was surprised how many people responded to that little section tirade before the violence began.
All right. Our next question comes from the beautiful, beautiful RJ Rolls, who is one of the admins on the legendary Books of Horror page. And he wants to know, what's the one thing you wish you knew right from the start about writing? And second parter, he also wants to know, can he have another back rub at Author Conto? I know you guys are tabled near each other.
Second part, I have no idea what he's talking about. I don't know anything about that. But first part of the question, which is actually valid. My best answer for this is to not be afraid to get a story wrong. Now, this is a little different than what I was talking about earlier. I think stories benefit from writing a fearless first draft. So just the act of getting the story down, even if every line isn't right, is more valuable than, doing a Vonnegut where every line is perfect all the way through. I think that worked for him. I don't think it works for everybody. I think that's where you lose a lot of story, is when you're afraid to write the wrong line. Now, the side effect of that is that you need to be willing to edit heavy. So when you get to the edit phase, you got to be willing to fix all the things that weren't perfect, and sometimes take a couple passes at a story to get it just right, to get all the themes connected and that kind of thing. But I think if someone had told me don't be afraid to get the story wrong the first time, the first draft, I think I would have progressed faster. So I think that would have been good advice to have at the beginning. That kind of is the cornerstone of my writing process now.
That's a great advice, obviously. RJ, hopefully that helps you in your travels. And Jay's going to be exercising his thumbs so he can get those knots out of your back for AuthorCon 2 coming in end of March 23.
All right, I'm going to take the next one. James Simone wants to know if you could do one thing differently in your career, what would it be?
Oh, Lord. It's one of those things where like some lessons can only be learned through suffering. And so you almost can't subtract your mistakes and still be where you are. I think that's probably true in writing too. I think every genre that I can write, I started out writing it badly and then got better. And I think that's kind of how some of those things work. Probably, again, if you have hindsight where I knew all the answers, there are certain platforms and things that didn't work out that I wouldn't have invested the time in. So probably that would be different. Part of me wants to have gone full-time sooner, like quit the day job sooner. But again, I don't know that would have made a huge difference. So if I had the magic wand, maybe I would have been a writer sooner and not had all those miserable years where I was just kind of going through the motions of life and didn't have a passion that really inspired me the way writing does. But I don't know. I think the timing was right. So just in theory, I guess going full-time sooner would be the thing that I would change with a magic wand. But again, I think it was the right time when it happened.
That's a good answer there. All right, our next one, this is another excellent one, comes from Stephen Kozanowski, and he asks, fuck, marry, kill. Jans, Kozanowski, or Rosamelia? What's your order?
Lord. So I can't kill all of them. Is that what you're saying?
You can't kill all of them.
Oh, Lord. Well, obviously, Jans is the prettiest.
I'm going to tell Armand you said that, but okay, go ahead.
Armand and Kozanowski are just a bag of issues. So I wouldn't have sex with any of them. I'm going to hold out. I would marry Jans and just kill the other two. And it's nothing personal. It's just they would be awful humans to have to hang out with too long. So that's just going to have to destroy them both.
Yeah,
they understand. We're good friends. They understand.
That's acceptable because Jonathan Jans is a very, very handsome man. Got to meet him at AuthorCon. He seems.
I think he's past his prime. Now, see, like someone like me who never had a prime, I'm just going to float along. But someone like Jans, who clearly had a prime, I think he's going to struggle with not being as pretty as he was yesterday. Again, no offense to him. We all age, but when you're too pretty, people notice more. That's all I'm saying. I hope that doesn't destroy his ego. He's a great guy, actually.
Yes, he's very, very nice. All right, we have Roland. You want to ask a Matt Shaw's question? Go ahead, 'cause that's the last one.
Are you sure we're not out of time that we can't skip Matt Shaw?
Aaron, unless you'd like to ask a Matt Shaw's question.
Do we really need to give that guy any more airtime?
Roland seems so excited, though.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead. I'm playing. This is going to be terrible, but go ahead.
Roland, you find it? Or you want me to do it?
Do it, because I lost it.
Oh, that's too bad.
All right. So this is from Matt Shaw. I have it. Don't worry.
Sure.
All right.
So Matt Shaw asks, would he rather have a gerbil up his arse or a worm pushed down his pee-pee hole?
All right. Well, I've actually had things pushed down my pee-pee hole. And I won a gross out contest. And I believe I might have beat him. I think I may have beaten Matt Shaw. I don't remember if he was there. No one else there mattered. But I think I won the year that I talked about all the things being put in and pulled out of my pee hole. So I think the more important issue here, whether I were to pick one of these ridiculous scenarios or not, is that we really entertain Matt Shaw's bullshit a little too much. I think he's given a little too much credit for the cleverness that goes into some of this nonsense. When most conversations with him are just the C word every third word. And so I'm going to refuse to answer Matt's question. If someone else had asked it, maybe. But I guess just from experience, I've had more pee hole experience than I had things shoved up my ass. So no offense to anybody that's into either of those things. Do your thing. But
well, it's funny you should say that. If
about Matt
somebody
Shaw being
asked,
overrated or about
Thomas Wake actually said that he had the same question in mind, but the other way around. I think it was a gerbil in the pee hole.
Okay.
So,
Oh, jeez.
I think the worm either way, right? I mean,
I don't know, gerbil
these
has
are really
claws.
girth questions, aren't they?
Yeah, gerbil has claws though. They don't fuck you up.
Like, is that worm ever coming out if it goes in?
I think you gotta pee it out. We pee it out really hard.
You got to leave it
yeah.
on the hook. I think that's the key, so you can pull it back out.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah, you gotta have a safety net on it.
Like a level 10.
All right, Roland. You want to go on to the next batch of questions?
Yes. So let's see. Christopher Bison. I hope I probably said that wrong.
That's
I'm
pretty sure it's wrong.
I've been looking for a good recommendation where to start with him, and nobody has given me one. So I'm curious, which title would you point a newcomer to for a first go?
Oh, wow. See, I'm so used to being at conventions that I kind of gauge the person and then try to put the title to them. Probably at this point, I would do Read, Write, Edit, Play, Repeat, the short story collection, just because I think it represents some of my best work. It has a multimedia aspect to it, and it covers a few different genres. So I think it's probably the best representation of me. And it's sold pretty well at the table. That one and the new zombie one are probably my best sellers at convention tables at this point.
And Jay, those can be found on Amazon?
Yes.
Okay.
Rewrite, Edit, Play, Repeat is on there, and then the zombie story: ruthless, rabid, raging, ravenous, rampaging, remorseless, repulsive, revolting zombies.
Is there repugnant in there at some point? There's no repugnant.
Yeah, I got repugnant. I think I
did.
I think I said
Are you sure?
I may have missed it. I mean,
think you missed
it's
it.
a
That's all right.
ridiculous title. If you can't remember your own title, you fucked up. And
That was your Nano book, right?
yeah.
Yeah, that's right. I remember watching that on Twitch, and I remember I don't know if it was just a rando came in there, and it's just about it being too violent, and you're like, yeah, it's fucking extreme horror or splatterpunk. Like, you're in the
funny
wrong
thing
room.
is, I don't even write my most violent, gross stuff on Twitch. Like the stuff that I really go over the top in, that's off stream. I don't want to get banned or whatever. So that story, though there was a lot of zombie violence in it, and a lot of more action than I would say true violence. It's tamer than a lot of other things that I write.
That's good to know.
Wait, before, I want to
go ahead,
ask.
Roland.
So I know you've written a lot of stuff, but what was, like, if you can pinpoint your favorite book to write, something you had the most fun?
I really enjoy the collaborations I do with Armand. I think we both elevate our game when we're working together. So the first time that we did Enemy Held Near, which is a haunted house story, each of us were kind of impressed by the other person's chapters, and we would push a little harder. And then it kind of continued with future books. So we'd get another book. Each of us would take turns coming up with the premise in the first chapter or two before the next person took over. And he would come in with some amazing chapter. Because, again, if you ask Armand what he is, he'll tell you he's a pulp writer. that he's just putting a story out there and going. And I don't think there's any shame in that. I think Brian Keene even describes himself the same way. But when we would write together, he would push almost a more, I don't know if literary is the right word, but a more elevated, and I know elevated is a bad word for horror now. There's no words left. I don't know, but there would be something better, something different to his writing when we were writing together. And I would see that and I'd be like, oh shit, I got to bring my A game to this. I was just going to write, but now I got to write. And I would come up with the best chapter I could to follow that up. And he would have the same experience where he'd be like, oh shit, Jay's bringing his A game. I really got to deliver on this fourth chapter or I'm going to be the one dropping the ball. And then he would deliver and I'd be like, oh God, I wasn't ready for this today. I really need to think about what I want to do for chapter 5. And so we both kind of push each other in that way. So I think it was fun in that sense. Also, when authors talk about surprising themselves when they're writing, there's some bullshit in that because obviously it still came out of your head. But when you're writing with another author and they throw a curveball at you, then you literally didn't see it coming. And so I think we had more twists and turns that were of higher quality because the actual authors themselves were surprised over and over with how we would come up with a twist that the other person couldn't. And so those are essentially books that I couldn't have written by myself. Like I would not have produced as good of a version of Enemy Held Near if it was just Jay Wilburn writing it, because I was pulling in the best work from another author. I don't think all collaborations are that good, but those were kind of some of the moments that I felt like I was really doing something as a writer.
Nice. Okay. Daniel, you grab the next question.
I'm going to go to the next two because the next one, I'm not sure what Nick Gray was. I think he was just very, very excited when he wrote it. Nick Gray, also an author, says, Jay Wilburn, what will he burn? I don't know if you have any like pyrokinesis or pyrotechnical.
No, I'm not one of those that wants to see the world burn necessarily. I just I wouldn't necessarily put it out. That's all I'm saying.
Okay, got it. So okay, you didn't start the fire.
No, yes, I might have. Okay. I'm not. I mean, give me time. I'll come up with an alibi.
Yeah. The next one comes from Wiley Young, another one who guested on this show. Says, how does it feel to be known colloquially as either the man with 3 kidneys or I think it's supposed to be Immortal J?
I think I punch above my weight on reputation because there's not a lot special to me. But I kind of have a reputation for being inspiring. I have a reputation for being wise. I have a reputation for being strong and getting through things and all this kind of stuff. And really, I just kind of get up in the morning and kind of half-ass my way through the day and make it back to bed. And apparently, most of you are just giving like maybe a quarter ass at best. And so that's sort of why I think I excel. Like I'm pretty sure, that idea of like, you don't have to be the fastest person running away from the bear. You just have to be faster than the guy behind you. I think that's my entire career. Like, I think maybe I just have moments where I'm just slightly faster than some of the people behind me. And it clouds up into something bigger. So I'll hold on to that reputation as fast as long as I can. But I don't think I'm all that much more special than most people. I think I just sell it better.
Nice, yeah, definitely. I think you're a total package. I think just the way you present it. It's just.
Yeah, how can everybody resist all this?
No, it's just that's the only reason. I watch your Twitch stream on mute. And that's pretty much it.
just to look at my face as the colors change from the lighting. Yeah, all right.
We actually have a question with the color change, and we're going to get to that.
Good.
If you can guess
who
submitted it.
He seems to be really fascinated by it, but go ahead.
I don't want to spoil it, but yes, it is. The next question comes from Dawn Keat, who is an amazing follower. She watches the show. She comments a lot on YouTube. She's got a Yeah, be very nice to her. She's a sweetheart. Hers is a 2-parter. What are your hobbies outside of writing? And also, do you listen to anything in particular when writing?
I don't listen to things. I used to have kind of the radio on low behind me. Now, maybe that's not true. Sometimes I'll put other people's Twitch streams up and kind of have them low in the background kind of thing. just to kind of support other people on there. So that I'll do that sometimes. And if there's a lot of noise, like we're out in the woods, but we're close enough across rivers and stuff to where I can hear leaf blowers, which for some reason is like the worst sound in the universe for me. And so I'll put on like ocean sounds or something to drown all that out. Or if the family's being loud in the house or that kind of thing. So that I don't know if that counts as listening, but that's as close as I get. Here's where my memory kicks in. The first part of the question was hobbies, right? Okay. I start and stop a lot of shit. I was into archery for a while. I like run. I'm getting back into that as much as I can, mostly to just try and stay alive. Riding a bike, I like doing. Obviously reading. I'd like to read constantly, and typically I'll pick an author and just go through their entire catalog. I'll just start at the beginning and take however many years it takes to just go all the way through. I'm doing Brian Keene right now, which I may never catch up with how much he publishes in a year, but I just finished off Stephen King, and so I kind of have fun with that. I guess that kind of counts as work too, because I blog those books and put those up. But that's most of it. I don't travel as much as I used to. That used to be my thing. I guess I'm getting too old for hobbies. Maybe that's it. I'll sit and watch TikTok for a long time, and then post. When I see a review of someone's book, I'll post a link to it and make their day. That kind of thing. But I'll sit with my attention span and my memory problems. TikTok is kind of the perfect amount of nonsense that I can kind of just scroll through. I do the same thing with YouTube too. Like I'll just randomly pick a podcast and listen to the whole thing and then like watch old vines and stuff. So I'll do that kind of shit to listen, like videos. I'll get caught up on YouTube on like listening to random acoustic covers of some song, and I'll listen to like 3, 4, 5 of the same song done by different people acoustically. And I'll go down that rabbit hole, and then I'll end up like listening to 80s music for like, an hour and a half. And I'll be like, I forgot that song existed. And then, of course, YouTube knows how to play the algorithm. I'll be like, I forgot that song existed, that kind of thing. So
Absolutely.
That's kind of, I don't know if that counts as a hobby, but that's kind of how I waste time now.
Yeah, it's TikTok is like crack, so I definitely understand that. I find myself doing that as well. Like I'll be sitting there, I'll be like, oh, I'm bored. Let me just take a look at this, and I'm like, oh shit, it's an hour later, and I've done nothing with my day. Right, wasting an hour of my life. But all right, Roland, hit him with the next one.
I have a quick question. How old are your kids? I'm just curious.
10 and 16.
Okay, I was just curious. Boys or girls?
Both boys.
Okay. Yes.
Didn't you listen to my intro, Roland, when I said that? You had a wife and 2 sons. But all right, you didn't. So go ahead, just ask.
It's been a long time. It's a long day. I can't ever get anybody on memory.
Damn, you put him on blast. Holy
full blast.
Here's the funny thing. I actually do have some cognitive issues. So I have legitimate memory loss, which is making a lot of things hard. But the most irritating thing about it is that I expect everybody else to remember shit that I've forgotten, and it is shocking how poor normal people's memory is. Because I'll be like, okay, we were talking about this thing. And of course I have actual holes in my memory. I'll be like, we were talking about this thing and this happened. And then like, everybody's like, we don't know what the fuck you're talking about. And which of course could be that I don't actually remember it, how it happened. Or like a lot of times I'm the only sober person in a room. And so like, I remember shit that other people don't, or like just normal memory loss. So like a normal person's memory is just fucking awful. And I'm very disappointed. As a person with legitimate memory loss, you guys should play some of those brain games or something, because I'm counting on you to hold on to shit that I can't hold on to. But so you're kind of off the hook, Roland. Everybody has a fucking awful memory.
That's right, Daniel.
Sorry, Roland. Sorry, I'm not fucking sorry. Read the next question.
I'm gonna read the next 2 questions because they're easy.
Please do.
RJ Rolls. You're a good beat up. RJ Rolls wants us to say, I just wanted to say, just tell Jay we love him, all of us.
All right.
So everybody loves you. We all love you.
If he's trying to weasel into a back rub, I don't know where that came from, and that's not going to work either. But go ahead.
Sorry, RJ. And Jesse Thibodeau, who I just had a long conversation with the other day, he's such a nice guy. You kind of already answered this. what was your favorite book to write and why?
Oh, favorite of all.
Yes.
It's hard to say. There's so much, like each one kind of represented something different that I was trying, even the ones that didn't end up ultimately being successful. I enjoyed writing the children's books. Maybe I'm going to go that direction. And then the Lake Scatterwood series is like there's 2 chapter books in each book. And I wrote it for my son when he first went to camp. We were able to send an email with a certain word count. And so I just sent him chapters to the story that I was making up about kids fighting aliens at a camp.
Nice.
And he really enjoyed it. And he was struggling with reading at the time. So he was getting older, but was still on a lower reading level. So it was hard for him to find things that he liked. And so I wrote this story that was high interest, but like a lower reading level than what would normally be for that age group. And so I did it for him for a couple years going to camp, and then I started putting them together and publishing them. And a lot of parents and children responded to it because they were funny and they were written easier to read. So like I was pitching for maybe upper elementary, but a lot of middle school kids liked it, even though it was a low reading level, because they enjoyed the humor in it. And recently, the younger of my 2 sons, we're kind of getting them both into reading. We homeschool them, and what we do for reading is that we just read. They pick a book, and we both read it. So like they're assigned a chapter that day. I read the chapter, they read the chapter, we talk about it, and that's everything that we do until they're readers, until they're reading on their own. And it worked really well with my older son when he was struggling as a reader, and it's starting to work for my younger son. But he was struggling with a couple of the books that he picked, and then he picked up this Lake Scatterwood book that I wrote, and really loved it, and was going through it. So it kind of reawakened that, like, oh, I did a good job with this. I'm really proud of this, and really enjoys the humor, and you can hear him laughing out loud when he reads it, which is like the best review I've ever had of anything. Having my son laugh at something that I wrote. So I really enjoy those books. I don't know if it counts as picking a favorite, but it's probably because that's happened recently. It probably is the one that holds the most meaning to me, because I did originally write it for my sons, and I've enjoyed the feedback that I've gotten from other kids and parents that have liked them.
Awesome.
That's great. All right, so the next question is from Mr. Frank Adler. And he says, question for Jay.
He likes the purple light in my hair. I know that.
He does. He says, do you think the Written Red Boys are dropping the ball by not using dynamic multicolored lighting on their hair, which I have none of, the way you do on Twitch?
Yeah, it's tricky when you're writing because there's not a lot of action going on. So like the trick with the lighting is that like if you have like colors changing, it adds like a false sense of dynamic motion. So it fools the people into thinking more is going on than what it really is. Actually, my hair's cut off right now. My head's a little scarred up from a medical procedure, and then I'm going to have a bunch of stuff attached to my head here. Actually, tomorrow I'm going to get a portable EEG put on. So we're going to have to see how it looks. Like once my head heals up, we're going to have to see how that looks with the light shining off my shiny head as opposed to my glorious locks that I no longer have.
Yes, Daniel. It's blinding.
No, it'll look good. It'll look good. Look at the shine on it. Nice.
Got a little too much shine going on there. I think you
I
need
know.
to adjust that lighting a little.
That's a day old, too.
Or wax the head so it's not as shiny.
Oh, no. I do wax it.
Oh,
Not like Roland waxes his body, but like he sent us fucking videos.
Videos?
Did you like it?
Highly disturbing. I don't know
That's
how he does. I think he puts his phone on the
Matt Shaw
floor.
level nonsense.
I know. I just put one leg behind my head.
Oh my
Hold on,
god!
you're gonna hurt yourself.
Hey, I might be 51, but I'm still.
And that would be the point that you'd be found, like paramedics coming in, and then you got to explain the story that's actually the truth, but no one's going to believe it. That kind of thing.
Like I was trying to tell my friend Daniel I could put my leg behind my head. Sure.
You found like David Carradine. Fucking the fucking worst way.
That's how I want to go.
Like David Carradine.
Yeah.
Sexual
Strangled to
asphyxiation
death in Thailand.
Yeah. All right. Well, time wise, I think.
Wait, we have one more question. Literally one more question.
Okay. No, we can squeeze it in.
Okay, so I'm gonna read the last one. S.C. Mendez, how long have you been writing full time? And what's one piece of advice he'd give an author when considering making that leap?
Okay, well, the best advice is don't do it. That's the safest bet. But I've been full time since February of 2013, and recent years has been stable. There was a lot of unstable time during that. The problem with it is there's no good time. So, like, if we speak more broadly, anytime you deal with a leap of faith, you're never going to see the landing spot. So, like, people want to wait until they have some bestsellers. They want to wait until they're financially stable. They want to wait till they can afford the house, the payments, the everything that they have. They want to be able to fund their lifestyle as it exists now without the day job before they make the leap. If you decide that's what you need, you're never going to leap, because anytime you're making a leap of faith, a bet on yourself, the landing site is foggy. You're not going to see it, and that's why it's a leap of faith. That's why you're betting on yourself, gambling on yourself, and making the jump. And it's going to be tricky. It's everybody around you that cares about you is going to tell you you're making a mistake, and that your family's going to starve to death, and all that kind of stuff. The reality is that it's harder to starve to death in America than people think. So there's you just kind of go on surviving. Again, there's nothing wrong with not doing it. So I think we need to emphasize that choice, the idea that you can work your day job, write, and have a fulfilling writing career doing that. I don't think again, this is easy for me to say as I'm a full-time writer and doing what I want to do, but that's not the only path. So it's not like there's a line of success and being a full-time writer is on one side of it and everybody else is on the other side. So I think that may be a stigma that would be good to drop. But it also might make it easier to one day be full-time if you're not marking your line of success that way. Like you're a failure up until the point that you become a full-time writer. I don't think there's anything healthy about that, and I don't think it actually helps you get there. Now, there is something to be said about a moment when, like, your life as it is more painful than the risk of the leap, and a lot of times that's the moment people will make the leap of faith, and it's almost always going to be too early. Like it's you're not ready, you're not at that point, but sometimes you just got to do it. I would say broadly, not just about writing full time, but I think there's a benefit in taking a gamble on yourself every once in a while. You don't have to do it every time. You don't have to throw out your entire life every moment you have a whim. But every once in a while, make a bet on yourself and go for it. The worst that could happen is that you fail miserably. That's the worst that could happen. And that can happen to you even when you play it safe. So if you stay at the safe job, if you stay at the safe life, your life can be pulled out from under you at any moment. So even if you play it safe, it could still happen. Your worst fear could still occur. But every once in a while, just take that risk, knowing that the worst that could happen is that you fail and have to start over. But that might happen anyway when you don't take a chance on your dreams. So I would say whether it's something big like going full time or it's just some other opportunity that's out there, every once in a while, take a gamble on yourself. Because at the end of your life, there's not going to be a moment where you're saying, oh, I wish I hadn't tried. I had that year and a half that I tried, and then I just had to go back to my job. Whereas at the end of your life, you're very likely to be upset about the moment you never tried and never found out. And again, like I said earlier, a lot of times being successful at something is just the refusal to quit. And so as long as you keep trying, you haven't fully failed yet. And it may be another opportunity down the road. But that would be my advice. If you're going to do it, you're going to end up making a leap of faith to somewhere where you can't see the landing yet. And that's how it's always going to be. And if you wait for a perfectly clear view of where you're going to land, you're never going to jump.
That is excellent advice. I like that. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think going back to like that Matt Shaw episode too, he was talking about it a little bit, like that he had, I forget who he said he spoke to, but he sort of asked somebody for advice because he was selling enough to be able to like pay his bills for like a few months. Mm-hmm. And then he was like, he asked this person that he trusted in the industry, and they were like, oh yeah, now's the time to do it because, you know what I mean? Like, and then it's like ups and downs after that. And you sort of just figure it out. You get out there and you figure out, and hopefully you have multiple revenue streams available. Like when I did it, I just was like, fuck it. you know.
Mm-hmm.
But I was comfortable enough. I hated my job enough, like you said. You know, there's that person that's just like at the edge. That was me. And then, but I was fortunate enough to get like a big push with like TikTok, and the slob blew up. So I felt like really comfortable about it. But then there's also the fear of like, you know, being censored, or the rug being pulled out from under you, or sales eventually dropping. But I think, you know, if you can pay your bills, it's probably a safe time to do it. And if you have those multiple revenue streams, you know, because then, like you said, Jay, and same with me, like when they're not all going to dry at the same time, you know. So, and hopefully by the time, you know, if one's having issues, hopefully it'll recoup and rebound by the time another goes down, and you get that continuous flow. But
I remember at a convention I was at, there were two like name authors who had been on the bestseller list, and we were all just kind of setting up. And the two of them were talking about the last bestsellers they had. And both of them talked about that they thought at the time that after they got their first bestseller that was it. Like they were on a certain level and were going to stay there. But the reality was they had to start over every single time. And so every time they got back to the bestseller list, they fought their way back up to it. And then they started over again the next time. And there was never a level that they just reached at and everything was smooth sailing. And I actually took comfort in that, because the one thing I was good at was grinding it out. So that idea that even when you hit a certain level, you're starting over. It's always starting over and working your way back up to that level again. When you think of it that way, then the indie author who's used to working hard and struggling to get noticed is probably the best prepared for that lifestyle. You know, that idea that like one day you might make it to the bestseller list, but at the same time, you got to start back over. But you're good at that. You already do that well. So kind of that idea that, oh, there's these levels that you have to reach. It's more along the lines of there's this constant hustle that you're going to have to go through no matter what level you reach. So in a sense, like all the hard times you're going through is your best preparation for what it's going to be like when you do find success. And that starting over is kind of reusing those skills again.
But it's like you should feel good doing that too, you know, like otherwise you probably shouldn't make the leap, because like if you don't like grinding at this, you probably don't love it enough to do it, you know, because it is going to be like a grind. And you can even ask people like Matt, you know, it's a continuous grind. There's always another release. So it's like, as long as you have the stories and the material and you can keep writing, anybody could do it, I think. You know, it's just a matter of, like you said, I think I always point to consistency as a huge thing. Consistency and just making sure that, you know, you get into grooves and your audience understands that there's cycles and that you're not going to disappear. You know, as long as you don't disappear, the people who enjoy your work are going to keep coming back, unless, you know, like you said, the content takes a dive off a cliff. But we should be getting better, not worse, you know. So in theory, that doesn't make sense to me anyway. But awesome. No, this has been great. So we're about 2 hours in. So I think, Dan, should we get down to the reader recognition and the author spotlight?
Yeah. So, Jay, as you know, we do this on every show. We always try to recognize somebody in the horror community that is an author that's maybe not getting read as much as maybe they should, a hidden gem, if you will. And we always try to recognize one of our readers. So since you are our guest, we're going to leave that honor to you. So give us a reader and give us an author.
All right. I'm sure she's been mentioned before, but Christina Pfeiffer, she asked a question right there at the beginning. Again, she's one of those super fans that buys everything and reads everything, and she does it for a lot of authors. And of course, she's a good maven where she talks about what she's enjoyed and that kind of thing. Also, I enjoyed the moment where she posted for just no reason that if anybody talked bad about me, she was going to round kick them in the face, which got a lot of attention. So that's the kind of level of commitment I want from a reader. Like I want them to commit violence if someone doesn't appreciate me as much as they should. That's, again, I don't necessarily need them to do it, but just that they're willing to, I think means a lot.
And I believe her. I believe her when she says that. And I know she lives in the frozen tundra of Alaska, but I would love if she could make it to an author con besides the severed head that Marion was carrying around of her likeness. But it would be great if she could make it out there one day.
Yeah,
Yeah, so there's a lot of readers like her in that group that are worth naming, but she's a good one. I appreciate her.
Yeah, and I want to piggyback on that too. Thanks to her, she's always shared my material, and not just mine, like everybody's. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, she has that passion, and that's really like the lifeblood of what we do is like people like her specifically, who are super passionate about this and getting the word out. So thank you so much, Christine. I really appreciate it.
All right, the author that I pick is Chuck Buda. I think he's underappreciated for the level of work that he's putting out there, and some of my favorite stuff comes from him. He has the Son of Earp series, which he was writing before Westerns started to get a rise up. And even with all the people who write Westerns now, I think his is still one of the best adaptations. I think he had a natural love for that genre, and the idea of like the supernatural meets the Wild West, and then the historic elements that he brings in about Wyatt Earp and the places that he's been and stuff. I think is pretty awesome. So if you're into anything like that, the Son of Earp series by Chuck Buda is good. His Debt Collector series is awesome, and then the most recent stuff he did, In the Marrow, which already also leans into the West, and Boondock Butcher are all great. So if you pick up something from Chuck Buda, I think you're going to love it, and he's got a lot to offer, and I think more readers need to check him out. Absolutely.
That's a great pick. Chuck is not only a great author, but he is a fucking hilarious person. People have heard me talk about him before because he does the Mondo Method with Armand Rosamilia. I think it's every Wednesday. Love that show. Love the energy that Chuck puts out, and Armand. I got to read an arc of Boondock Butcher, and I loved it. Yeah, he. I was actually really taken back by it because he just out of nowhere were kind of bullshitting, and he's like, "Hey, I have this, kind of extreme splatterpunky book coming out. If you want to take a look at it." And I was like, "Oh shit, yeah, of course I do." So I jumped right on that, and I actually pre-ordered his westerns because I do like straight westerns as well.
Yeah, he's writing those now too, and he's well equipped for it. It's something that he's loved for a long time as a reader.
Yeah, I think he's really going to hit his stride with the westerns, and he does. He has a lot of other cool stuff out there. I got to meet him last year at Beers and Fears, and I'm happy that you picked him for that.
Yeah, if you like horror and you like westerns, you should definitely check out his Son of Earp stuff too. It's really great. It has that it has everything that you'd love in a western, and then he weaves in the supernatural really well.
And that's a pretty long series, correct? Like I think he's got.
Yeah, he's gone in. It's interesting because he I don't want to give away why he does it, but basically each setting kind of ends up at a place that Wyatt Earp spent some time. And so he's done some extensive research on Wyatt Earp's life, and that's kind of provided the settings. There's a reason for that, but I don't want to start running through plot points and stuff for people that would discover that for themselves when they read it.
Yeah, it's definitely. I think I have the first one. I haven't read that. In the Marrow is the one he did with Armand, and I'd really want to get that one as well. But like I said, I ordered his straight westerns because I enjoy westerns, and I think he's gonna crush it.
Yeah, it's gonna be great. Yeah, absolutely.
Check out Chuck Buda. Aaron or Roland, have you guys seen anything by Chuck or seen him around? I know he's not made he's not on Facebook at all. I don't think. I think he's
not on social media a ton.
I've seen other people sharing his stuff. I haven't actually had a chance to read anything, but it definitely looks cool. We'll definitely check it out for sure. And I think you mentioned him, and you might have just said this too, right? He's on the podcast with Armand, right? Yeah. I know I remember that.
Yeah, they do the Mondo Method podcast, which is, as everybody knows, it's one of my favorites. But yeah, Chuck's a great guy. He'll just randomly text me too, like I miss your face. And like at fucking 10:30 at night, and I get a text message from Chuck Buda. I miss your face. I miss you. And I'm like, I miss you too, Chuck. Like, thanks. And I always send him pictures because he's a deer hunter, and I am as well. And he wasn't able to get out the last couple of years, so I always send him pictures of my fully stocked freezer just to rub it in. That he's meatless.
Armand gives him a hard time about being a hunter, but not a successful one. That's it's kind of a running joke.
Yeah, he's gonna be the one that gathers the plants. He can make the salads for us. No, Chuck's awesome. I love Chuck.
I haven't read anything about it, but I just purchased Boondock Butcher.
There you go.
Oh, yeah, you'll like that one, Roland.
Yeah.
It's a good one.
Awesome.
I don't know if he has any audiobooks, but I'm sure he does.
I want to say yes, but I'm not positive now.
Actually, I think he does because I remember listening to an episode of him and Armand, and they were talking about a free audiobook
Yes, he
site.
does. He does. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, he has.
They're a part of it,
several
so.
audiobooks.
You know, I love my audiobooks.
We know that.
Daniel.
Yep. Sorry, I was muted for a second. All right, I think that's pretty much it that we have for Mr. Wilburn. Jay, thank you so much for coming on. We really appreciate it. You obviously spread a lot of knowledge, and it was great. Like, you answered a lot of questions, and this is going to be an episode that I think people will watch over and over to take some notes on. Even though
nice.
you may not think you're the guru, but a lot of us, you've been doing it full time for almost 10 years, and that's no laughing matter. You know, that's a goal that a lot of people aspire to, and you know, hopefully that people will be able to pick your brain. So, Aaron, go ahead, give us this fucking signature play out.
Well, first, let's say, Jay, do you mind telling us where we can find all your stuff, or if there's anything you're promoting? I mean, Daniel doesn't want you to get over with the readers, but I certainly do.
Too many readers. Jay,
how much money do you really need? You know what I'm saying? Like,
come on, Dan.
Piling up.
You have a multicolored light. Like, not everybody has it. That's a sign of success.
Those are a dime a dozen.
Go ahead, Jay.
Obviously on Amazon, you can go to jaywilburn.com. The newest thing I have coming out, not exactly new, but it's going to be on paperback for the first time. Curse of the Rat Man comes out June 25th, depending on when this airs. I guess it would already be out. And so it'll be out in ebook and paperback for the first time. And so a lot of people have responded well to that one. So I'm excited about people actually getting it in their hands and me selling it at conventions as well. So if you want to check that one out, I think that would be a good one.
Awesome.
Yeah,
I read
that.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just saying I read that when it came out in Godless, and I think was that one of the Halloween releases, the 31 Days of Godless?
Yeah, may have been. He approached me about that, and I kind of had it sitting in the background and got a cover for it real quick and put it out. So
it's a good one, and it's a very unique idea, and it is violent as all hell. So I think fans of this show will definitely like that, and that's for Madness Heart Press, correct?
Yeah, Madness Heart has got that one.
All right. Yep. So definitely check that out. You know what, everybody? Go buy an ebook now. Read it. So that way, when you buy your paperback, you can keep it in pristine condition. So you don't even have to fucking damage it. And maybe at one of the conventions, you can have Jay sign it for you. So, yeah, because I fucked up before, so now I'm trying to make up for it.
Oh, okay. All right. You're
Aaron told me, I see. Yeah, Aaron told me I'm a piece of shit because I messed up. But it's all right. But it's normal.
You love it, though. Yeah.
I mean, if you're really a piece of shit, probably that one line is not going to change that. But I do appreciate it.
I do what I can. With what I've got.
Shout out to the dolls.
Oh yeah, they're here, all the mess, gazing.
Oh, there they are.
Oh my god.
That's where my writing money goes.
That's the creepiest fact I know about Daniel Volpe.
And you know what's even creepier is I don't have kids.
Daniel, tell us where we can find all your dolls. I mean, books and everything. You know.
My stuff is on Amazon. You can find me there. DanielJVolpeHorror.com. Find me there. Shoot me a private message on social media. Mainly Facebook is my go-to site, but any of the other ones, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. I'm not making like Chris Triana levels on TikTok of videos, but I do put some stuff up there. But he's on another fucking level right now. But yeah, find me all those major places.
He needs to calm the fuck down.
Hey, dude, he's out of control.
He just went full time, so he's probably pushing real hard. He's got the fear going, so he's
every day
for success.
Every day, Christiana created a new video on TikTok. Christiana created a new video, yes. And they're good, high quality content. Go ahead, Roland.
Yeah. Hey guys, you can find me at our website, RolandBurkseyJr.com. What are you laughing at it? I'm on
I love the introduction at the end of the show. But go ahead. I'm sorry.
Hey guys.
Hey guys. Hey guys.
Hey, check me out.
Oh, bye guys. You can find me on Amazon. You can find me on Facebook. Send me a message. I have Instagram, but I don't use it that much. So yeah, that's me. Bye, guys.
Do Carver as well, since you fucked yours up.
Oh, okay. Oh, yes. Yeah, Carver Pike. Don't forget my friend Carver. He's also on Facebook, and you can find his Diablo Stuff series along with Faces of Beth, his newest release on Amazon as well. And does he have a website? I don't think he has a website.
I think it's like carverpike.com or some shit. I think he does.
Yeah, it's something lame like that.
But yeah, check out his Facebook
So you can just
page.
not be on this podcast ever, and you'll just promote your books. Can I be an unofficial member of the podcast and not show up like Carver Pike does?
There's a blood oath that you have to take.
Yeah.
Okay.
And you have to send so many dick pics per hour. We're
Yeah.
on an
There's
hour.
a-
Never mind.
There's a
I'm doing
quota.
fine.
Yeah. They don't have to be yours.
It can be
Yeah.
extra.
Still. Sounds like a guy who has dolls behind him.
All right, guys. I'm Aaron Beauregard, author of The Slob and so many others. Thanks for everyone for buying the cuck. I appreciate you. You can go to my horror store, abhorror.com, and that's where all my like merch and signed stuff is. But otherwise, pretty much everything is on Amazon for the time being. Thanks again, Jay, for joining us on the show. This has been awesome and informative.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I know a lot of people that a lot of our regulars have probably learned quite a bit today, so we appreciate that. And until next time, keep it 100% horror.